They told her the car was dead. Every expert agreed. Every dealership. Every engineer with a diploma on their wall and an hourly rate that could feed a family for a month. They were all wrong. And the man who proved it, a quiet single father working out of a garage most people drove past without a second glance, wasn't just going to fix her car. He was going to save her empire. And neither of them would ever be the same. If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Follow along to the very end, because every part of this one matters. The rain had been falling for 40 minutes before Vivian Sterling's car finally gave up. It didn't sputter, it didn't cough or lurch, or give her any warning at all. One moment she was doing 83 miles an hour on the empty stretch of Route 9 outside the city, her phone pressed between her shoulder and her ear, her eyes skimming the merger draft on her tablet, the way she always drove when she was late and the world wasn't moving fast enough. And then the next moment, the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Every warning light she had never once seen in 2 years of owning the car, and the engine simply stopped, just stopped, like it had made a decision. She managed to coast to the gravel shoulder before the vehicle rolled to a complete halt, the wipers still sweeping back and forth across a windshield now clouded with rain, and the only sound was the patter of water on the roof and Marcus Gould's voice from the phone speaker saying, "Vivian? Vivian, are you still there?" "I'm here," she said. "The Nakamura people land at 9. We need you in that conference room by 8:30 at the absolute latest, because if they walk in before you do, it sends a message we cannot afford to send right now." Marcus. She said his name the way she said most things, cleanly, with a precision that left no room for argument. "I need to call you back." She hung up. She looked at the dashboard. Every light was red. The fuel gauge read half a tank. The temperature gauge read normal. The engine read nothing, because the engine had decided to stop existing. Vivian Sterling, 30 years old, worth somewhere north of $4.2 billion, according to the last Forbes calculation, sat on the gravel shoulder of Route 9 in a car that cost more than most Americans made in 5 years. And the car was dead. And she was 40 minutes from the most important meeting of her professional life, and the rain showed absolutely no intention of stopping. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Clara?" "Yes?" "My car stopped working. I need a tow service, and I need a car service to Route 9, mile marker 44, right now." "Of course. Is everything—" "Just do it, Clara." She hung up again. Then she sat very still in the driver's seat, hands folded in her lap, and stared at the rain coming down through the headlights, which were still on because the electrical system, apparently, had not gotten the same memo as the engine. Vivian was not a person who panicked. She had been 16 when her father's company went bankrupt, and the house got foreclosed, and her mother started working doubles at a diner in Tucson to keep the lights on. She had been 22 when her first startup failed so publicly that a tech blog ran a piece titled "Sterling Silver Lining Turns to Lead." She had been 26 when her CFO embezzled $800,000 from the company she had rebuilt from nothing, and then had the audacity to send her a holiday card from Boca Raton while the investigation was still open. Panicking had never once solved any of those problems, but she was also, if she was being precise about it, furious. A quiet, contained, extremely controlled fury that had been living somewhere behind her sternum since the car stopped, and that was growing incrementally with every minute that passed. The tow truck arrived 47 minutes later. The driver, a heavy man in a yellow slicker who smelled like cigarettes and wet denim, hooked up the car with the professional efficiency of someone who had done the same thing several thousand times and had long ago stopped finding it interesting. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't offer theories. He just hooked up the car. "Where to?" he asked. "Whitmore Auto, downtown." He glanced at the car, really looked at it, the way people looked at things that cost a lot of money, and made a sound that might have been a whistle just through his teeth. "That's a Meridian Spectra, isn't it? The new one?" "Yes. They've got a dealership now over on Clement. Might be better equipped for something like—" "Whitmore," she said. He took her to Whitmore. The diagnosis took 2 hours. The senior technician at Whitmore Auto was a man named Philip Chen, who had 30 years of experience and a genuine affection for cars that came through even when he was delivering bad news. And he delivered the news to Vivian in the customer lounge with a tablet showing her a diagram she couldn't parse and an expression of real professional sorrow. "The engine management system has completely failed," he said. "Not just failed. The ECU is reading catastrophic damage across multiple subsystems. The valve timing, the fuel injection array, the ignition module. It's like everything went at once." "That's not possible," Vivian said. "I know it sounds that way, but the diagnostic is clear, and I have to be straight with you, Ms. Sterling. This isn't something we can repair. The engine would need to come out entirely, and even then the onboard systems are so integrated in this model that you're essentially looking at a replacement." "A replacement? A full engine replacement, yes. And there's a parts availability issue with the Spectra because it's a newer model, which means lead time, which means—" He set the tablet down and looked at her directly, because he was the kind of man who did that. "We're talking somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000, and a wait of 6 to 10 weeks. Vivian looked at the tablet. She looked at him. "Get me a second opinion." He nodded. "Of course. I can recommend a few places." She got 4 second opinions. The first was the Meridian dealership, whose service director confirmed everything Philip Chen had said and added that the warranty situation was complicated because the vehicle had been operated in conditions inconsistent with manufacturer specifications, which was their careful way of saying they weren't sure they were covering this, and also which was infuriating enough that Vivian had to physically leave the showroom before she said something that would become a problem. The second was Arroyo Precision Motors, which charged her $700 for a diagnostic, declared the situation beyond their capabilities, and refunded her $650 of it, which she found oddly decent. The third was a specialist out of a facility in the industrial district who had a wall of credentials and charged accordingly, and told her with complete confidence that the vehicle was essentially a total loss, and that if she wanted his honest professional recommendation, she should take the insurance settlement and purchase a new car. The fourth was a former motorsport engineer named Danica Reeves, who ran a performance shop in the warehouse district and who spent 3 hours with the car and came back to Vivian looking genuinely puzzled, which was the first emotion that had felt real to Vivian in this entire 2-week circus. "Something's off," Danica told her. "That's what everyone says." "No, I mean, something about the failure pattern is off. The way these systems are reading, the sequence of the errors, it doesn't match anything I've seen in a mechanical failure. Usually when something goes, there's a chain, a logical cascade. This is more like—" She stopped, frowned. "I don't know. I need more time." "What would more time tell you?" "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." Vivian waited 3 more days. Then Danica called and told her she hadn't been able to get any further without pulling the engine, and that if Vivian wanted her to do that, the labor alone was going to be significant, and that her honest professional assessment was still that the engine was gone. She said she had a feeling something wasn't right, but a feeling wasn't a diagnosis, and she couldn't in good conscience tell Vivian to spend $60,000 chasing a feeling. So that was that. So Vivian sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor, looking out over the city at night, and thought about what it meant that 5 experts, 4 of them very expensive, one of them genuinely trying, had all told her the same thing. She thought about the fact that the car had been serviced 2 weeks before the breakdown at the Meridian dealership and had come back with a clean bill of health. She thought about the fact that the breakdown had happened on the night she was driving to finalize the preliminary terms of the Nakamura deal, which was the most significant acquisition her company had attempted in 4 years. She thought about all of that very carefully. And then she did what Vivian Sterling always did when the conventional answer felt wrong to her. She rejected it. The idea started as frustration. She was on the phone with her communications director, a precise woman named Elena Park, complaining about the situation in the way that Vivian rarely complained, out loud to another person, when Elena said, almost as a joke, "You could put out a public challenge. Any mechanic in the country, best offer wins." Vivian had not laughed. "Run that by me again," she said. Elena had meant it as a pressure release valve, the kind of half-serious suggestion that gets made in moments of venting and then evaporates. But she recognized the tone in Vivian's voice, and she knew what it meant. "I mean, in theory, You put it out there publicly. You've had 5 experts declare the car unrepairable. You're offering a significant reward to anyone who can prove them wrong. It's a story. It gets press. It gets more than press, Vivian said slowly. It gets every serious engineer and mechanic in the country looking at the problem. Because they want the reward, and because they want to be the one who succeeded where everyone else failed. Right. And it publicly humiliates every expert who told me the car was a write-off if someone actually fixes it. Elena was quiet for a moment. Do you want to publicly humiliate them? I want to find out if this car is actually dead, Vivian said. The humiliation is secondary. She announced the challenge the following morning. The communications team put it out through her official channels, which had a combined following of roughly 11 million people across platforms. And the story was picked up by automotive media within the hour and by mainstream business news by afternoon. The offer was straightforward. Any licensed mechanic or automotive engineer who could repair the vehicle to full working order would receive $100,000 and a private meeting with Vivian Sterling, which her communications team correctly identified as a selling point to certain kinds of people. The response was immediate and, in Vivian's experience, predictable. The certified dealerships wrote in formally, noting that the vehicle had already been assessed and found to be beyond economic repair, and that they respected Ms. Sterling's right to pursue additional opinions, but wished to advise that no new information had come to light that would change their professional conclusions. This was, translated from corporate speak, their way of saying they didn't appreciate being publicly questioned. 3 celebrity mechanics with social media followings reached out, and Vivian's team turned 2 of them down because their primary interest was clearly in the content opportunity and not the car, and accepted one of them, a man named Trent Boyle, who had a television show and genuine credentials, as a gesture of good faith, and because Elena thought the press coverage would be useful. Trent Boyle spent 2 days with the car and then posted a 40-minute video explaining, in detail, why the vehicle was definitively beyond repair. The video got 2 million views. Vivian watched 7 minutes of it and turned it off. 6 automotive engineers with academic backgrounds submitted proposals. Vivian's technical team reviewed the proposals. 4 were declined because they were essentially theoretical. They wanted to run diagnostics and then advise rather than actually repair. 1 was accepted, and that engineer, a professor from a research university with a legitimate background in vehicular systems, spent 4 days with the car and then delivered a 12-page report concluding that the engine damage was real and complete and that repair was not feasible within any reasonable financial or temporal parameters. She read the whole report. Then she put it in a drawer. 2 weeks after the challenge launched, it had generated considerable media coverage and 0 workable solutions. The automotive press was running think pieces about whether the challenge itself was a publicity stunt. One publication ran an item suggesting that the whole thing was a marketing exercise for an insurance product Vivian's holding company had a stake in, which was entirely false and triggered a call from her legal team, though they agreed the story would probably disappear on its own. It was her assistant Clara who mentioned Logan Hayes. He called this morning, Clara said, setting down Vivian's afternoon coffee without being asked. Clara had been her assistant for 3 years and had developed an almost physiological understanding of Vivian's caffeine rhythms. He said he's been following the challenge. He's a mechanic, he said. He has a garage on the east side. What garage? Hayes Automotive Repair. Clara checked her tablet. It's on Birchfield Avenue. He's been operating it for about 5 years. Before that, he was... She scrolled. He was a senior automotive systems engineer at Corrigan Motors. Vivian looked up. Corrigan? Yes. Corrigan Motors had been, until its bankruptcy 6 years ago, one of the most technically sophisticated automotive manufacturers in the country. Their engineering division had been genuinely pioneering. She knew this because she had studied the company when her own investment team had considered acquiring some of the assets during the bankruptcy proceedings. The engineering staff, in particular, had been regarded as some of the best in the industry. Why did he leave? She asked. His file says he took a personal leave of absence about 5.5 years ago and didn't return. Clara hesitated in the way she hesitated when there was more. I pulled some background. His wife died, car accident. He had a young daughter. Vivian was quiet for a moment. How young? She would have been about 2 or 3 at the time. She's 8 now. So he walked away from Corrigan to raise his daughter. That's what it looks like. Vivian picked up her coffee. Set up a meeting. She went to the garage herself, which was not what Clara had suggested. Clara had suggested having Logan Hayes come to the office, which was the standard protocol for this kind of thing, because the office was controlled territory and Vivian functioned best in controlled territory. But Vivian wanted to see where this man worked. She had learned, over time, that you could tell a great deal about a person by the condition of the space where they did their most serious work. Hayes Automotive Repair was on Birchfield Avenue, which was exactly as unglamorous as the address implied. The block had a tire shop, a closed hair salon, a laundromat, and a Mexican restaurant that smelled extraordinary and had a hand-lettered sign in the window that said, "Open 7 days." The garage itself was a 2-bay operation with a concrete floor and fluorescent lighting and a waiting area that consisted of 3 plastic chairs and a coffee machine that had seen better decades. There was a child's drawing taped to the wall next to the coffee machine, purple and green, what might have been a car or possibly a spaceship, with 2 stick figures beside it and the words "Daddy and Me" in handwriting that was clearly and recently learning itself. Vivian looked at the drawing for a moment longer than she intended. Logan Hayes came out from under a raised pickup truck while she was still studying it. He was wiping his hands on a rag, not performing the gesture, actually doing it, with the focus of someone cleaning a tool they needed clean. And he was taller than she'd expected, with the kind of build that suggested he'd once been very physically active and had retained most of it without trying. He had dark hair that needed cutting and grease under 2 fingernails that the rag wasn't going to fix, and he looked at her with brown eyes that were, she thought, the opposite of impressed. "Ms. Sterling," he said. "Mr. Hayes. I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "I wasn't sure either," she said, which was more honest than she usually was with people she'd just met, and she couldn't entirely account for it. "You said you wanted to see the car before committing to anything, so I brought it." She nodded toward the flatbed that had pulled up behind her car service. The Spectra was on the back of it, looking expensive and inert. Logan looked at the car. He looked at it for a long time, not moving, not saying anything. His expression was focused in a way that was somehow different from the experts she had watched examine the vehicles. They had all approached it with the manner of people who already knew what they were going to find. Logan looked at it like someone reading a sentence that didn't quite make grammatical sense. "Can I get it in the bay?" he asked. "That's why I brought it." He directed the flatbed driver with brief, specific instructions, and within 20 minutes the Spectra was inside the second bay, and Logan was moving around it slowly, not touching it yet, just looking. He crouched down and looked at the undercarriage. He looked at the wheel wells. He stood and looked at the hood line. Vivian stood to the side and watched him look. "You've read all the diagnostic reports?" she asked. "I read everything that was publicly available, yes, and I had a contact at one of the dealerships pull some data for me." "And?" He didn't answer immediately. He moved to the driver's side, opened the door without asking. She noticed this, but said nothing, and leaned in to look at something on the dashboard. Then he straightened. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "The car was serviced before the breakdown. Routine maintenance at the dealership?" 2 weeks before. They said everything was fine." "Who authorized the service visit? Did you schedule it yourself?" She thought about this. "My assistant books the maintenance appointments. It came through the usual reminder system." "And you drove the car normally between the service appointment and the breakdown? No unusual behavior, no warning lights, nothing that made you think something was wrong?" "Nothing." He nodded slowly. Something was happening in his expression. Not excitement, not smugness, not the "I've got it" look she'd seen on a couple of the other experts when they thought they were about to make a point. It was more like the expression of someone carefully checking a calculation they suspected might reveal something unpleasant. "What do you think it is?" she asked. "I don't think anything yet," he said. "I need to look at it properly, and I need to talk to you about the proposal first." He walked her to the 3 plastic chairs and they sat. She noticed he pulled one of the chairs away from the wall and angled it so they weren't sitting in a row, so they were facing each other slightly, which she thought was either unconsciously considerate or very deliberately so, and she couldn't decide which. He had put the rag down on one of the tool chests, and she noticed his hands, which were large and competent looking and still had the grease under 2 nails. "I'm not going to take the reward," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "The $100,000. I'm not going to take it." "Mr. Hayes, the whole point of the challenge—" "I know what the challenge is." He wasn't rude about it. He said it steadily, like he was correcting a small factual error. "I've been following it since you announced it, and I understand the offer. I'm saying I don't want it." Vivian looked at him. In her experience, everyone wanted the money. Even the people who performed reluctance wanted the money. "Then what do you want?" "I want to buy the car." She stared at him. "The Spectra. I want to buy it from you. Fair market value for a vehicle in its current declared condition, which your insurance company and your experts have all assessed to be essentially worthless. I'll give you $500 for it." "You want to buy my car for $500. "I want to buy a vehicle that has been declared a total loss by multiple certified professionals for a symbolic price that reflects its professionally determined value." "Yes." Vivian studied him for a long moment. She was good at reading people, not because she particularly enjoyed people, but because reading them accurately was necessary for survival in the world she operated in. Logan Hayes was not performing confidence. He was not making a bet. He was stating what he believed to be the case, with the matter-of-fact calm of someone who had spent years knowing things other people didn't know, and had made peace with not being believed about it. "And if you can't fix it?" she asked. "Then you've gotten $500 for a car that everybody agrees is worthless," he said. "And I'm out the $500 and whatever time I spent on it." "Why?" she said. "Why not just take the reward if you fix it? That's $100,000. He was quiet for a moment, not evasive. She'd become expert at evasion, and this wasn't it. He was considering how honest to be, she thought, and then deciding. "Because I want to own it after," he said finally. "If I fix it, I want to know I fixed it, and it's mine. That matters to me in a way the money doesn't." She thought about the drawing on the wall, the purple and green spaceship car with the stick figures. $500, she said. $500. She put out her hand. He shook it. His grip was direct and brief. "I'll need access to the full diagnostic data," he said. "Not the summary reports, the raw data from every system that threw an error. I'll have my team send it over. I'll also need to know exactly who performed the routine service 2 weeks before the breakdown. Not the dealership, the specific technician." Something shifted in her chest very slightly, like a gear finding a notch. "Why?" "Because I want to understand the full service record," he said. "That's all." He held her gaze when he said it. She held his. Neither of them said anything else about it. Logan worked on the car for 3 days before Vivian heard from him again. She didn't contact him. She had the impulse to, twice on the first day, once on the second, and each time she redirected it, which required more deliberate effort than she would have admitted to anyone. She was not accustomed to being on the waiting end of things. She was the person who moved events forward. Waiting was something that happened to other people. On the second day, she found herself on the Birchfield Auto Repair website, which was functional in the way of websites that existed because not having one would seem strange, and which had a photo on the About page that showed Logan standing in front of the 2-bay garage, squinting slightly in the sun, with a small girl on his shoulders who had both fists raised in the air like she had just won something. The girl had his dark coloring and appeared to be entirely delighted by life in general. The caption said, "Logan Hayes and daughter Nora." Vivian closed the tab. On the third day at 11:40 at night, her phone rang. She was still at the office, which was not unusual. "I found something," Logan said. His voice was different, not louder. Logan Hayes was not a loud person, she was already certain of that. But there was something under it, a controlled energy she hadn't heard before. "Tell me," she said. "Not over the phone." A pause. "Can you come in tomorrow morning? Early." "How early?" 7. She was there at 6:50. The garage was already open when she arrived, the bay doors rolled up, the fluorescent lights humming against the early gray of the morning. There was a coffee maker running on the workbench, different from the one in the waiting area, a proper machine, and the coffee it was producing smelled significantly better. Logan was at the second bay. The Spectra was still on the lift, and he was standing beside it with his arms crossed, and an expression she was starting to recognize as the one he wore when he was thinking about something difficult. On the workbench beside the car, there was a small component in a clear plastic bag. "Coffee?" he said when she came in. "Please." He poured it. He handed it to her without asking how she took it, which she noted, but he had handed it black, and she drank it black, so either it was coincidence or he had looked it up, and she didn't know which possibility she found more interesting. "What did you find?" she said. He picked up the bagged component. "Do you know what this is?" She looked at it. It was small, perhaps 2 inches long, cylindrical, with a connector at one end. "No." "It's a sensor module in the engine management system," he said. "Specifically, it's the primary interface between the ECU and the engine's subsystems. It tells the computer what's happening with the engine in real time." He turned it in his hand. "When this fails, or reads as failing, the computer shuts everything down. It's a safety protocol. Catastrophic error detected across multiple systems, engine shuts off." "And it failed?" "No," he said. "It didn't fail. It was modified." The word landed quietly in the space between them. "Modified," she said. "Someone replaced a component inside this module with a near-identical one that was specifically engineered to read as catastrophically damaged without actually being damaged. Every diagnostic you ran, every system that checked the car, read the signal from this module and agreed with it. The car told them it was dead. They believed it." He set the component down. "It's a very sophisticated piece of work. Whoever built this knew exactly how the ECU interprets sensor data and exactly how to make a false reading appear completely genuine." Vivian set her coffee down very carefully on the workbench. "Someone sabotaged my car," she said. "Yes." "Deliberately?" "Yes." She looked at the small component in the plastic bag. It was so small. That was the part she kept circling back to. The thing that had stopped her car on a highway at 11 at night, caused 11 weeks of professional humiliation and $140,000 in diagnostic fees and expert consultations, and potentially compromised the most important business deal of her professional year, was something she could have put in her pocket without noticing. "You're certain," she said. "I can walk you through everything," he said. "The specs, the comparison to the OEM component, the way the modification is structured. I took photos at every step. I saved everything. And the car can be fixed." "The car can be fixed," he said. "Swap out this module for the correct one, run a full system reset. It should start up fine. The engine itself is completely undamaged." He paused. "I can do it in about 4 hours." She looked at him. The fluorescent lights above them were the unflattering kind. She was aware of this because most people look slightly unwell under fluorescent lights, and she suspected she was no exception. Logan looked like he was accustomed to them. "Mr. Hayes," she said. "Logan," he said. "Logan." She picked her coffee back up because she needed something to do with her hands. "Someone sabotaged my car. They had access to it during the routine service 2 weeks before it broke down. They needed enough technical expertise to build this," she nodded at the component, "and to install it without anyone noticing during a standard service visit. That means someone with automotive engineering knowledge and a connection to the dealership." "Yes." "The Nakamura merger was announced 6 months ago," she said. "The preliminary terms were due to be finalized the night my car broke down." He was watching her. "The stock in my company has dropped 9% in the past 2 months because of delays in the merger process," she said. "That's a significant amount of money for anyone who was shorting it." She felt the pieces assembling cold and logical, the way she always felt when she found the through line in a complicated problem. "Someone didn't just want to delay me that night. They wanted to delay the merger itself. Drag it out, create uncertainty, drive the stock down. And potentially," Logan said quietly, "engineer a situation where someone could move on your company at a lower valuation." She looked at him. "You've been thinking about this." "I've had 3 days in this garage," he said. "I had a lot of time to think." "And you didn't call me until you were sure." "I didn't call you until I was sure," he confirmed. She looked at the component in the bag again. "Keep it safe," she said. "Already photographed and documented," he said. "The bag is sealed. I haven't handled it without gloves since I identified it. I know how evidence works." You know how evidence works. Something moved across his face. Not quite amusement, more the muscle memory of it. I've had reason to know, he said. She didn't ask about that yet. There would be time. Right now she was looking at the bagged component and thinking about 9% stock loss and delayed merger terms, and who exactly stood to benefit from her company being vulnerable. The coffee machine behind them made a sound like it was finishing a cycle. Outside on Birchfield Avenue, the city was beginning its morning. Fix the car, she said. I will. And then I need you to help me figure out who did this. Logan Hayes looked at her for a moment. He wasn't surprised. She could see that. He'd been waiting for her to get there, maybe since the phone call last night, maybe since she'd walked into the garage 3 days ago. I figured you'd say that, he said. Is that a yes? He uncrossed his arms, picked up a wrench from the workbench, and turned back toward the car. Let me fix it first, he said. But Nora Hayes was 8 years old, and she could tell when her dad was worried about something by the way he made pancakes. On regular mornings, she got the normal kind. Round, from a box mix with butter and syrup, if she ate her banana first. On the kind of mornings when her dad was worried about something, she got the fancy kind with blueberries from the container in the freezer because he made them when he was distracted and he only ever added the blueberries when he wasn't paying full attention to what was in his hands. Saturday morning, she came downstairs and saw blueberries. Who were you on the phone with so late? She asked, climbing onto the kitchen stool. She was a morning person, which her dad sometimes said was cosmically unfair given that I made you. And she had her mother's eyes and his cheekbones, and she would eventually have her mother's hair, but right now it was a mess because she had slept on it wrong. Business stuff, he said. The car? He looked at her. You've been weird about that car, she said, since like 3 days ago. She accepted the plate of blueberry pancakes. Kira's mom says there was a lady billionaire on the news who had her car broken. Kira's mom is correct, he said. Is it that car? He poured himself coffee. Real coffee, not the kitchen machine, but the French press he only used when he needed to think, and leaned against the counter and looked at his daughter in the way he sometimes looked at her when he was deciding how much was the right amount to say. Yes, he said. It's that car. Did you fix it? I'm going to. Can you fix it? Nora. Well, if all those other people couldn't... I know something they didn't know, he said. She considered this, chewing thoughtfully. What do you know? He crossed the kitchen and kissed the top of her head, which she tolerated because she was 8 and not 12 yet. You'll see, he said. That's a dad non-answer, she told him. Yes, he said. It is. He turned back to the stove, and she watched him stand there with his coffee and his blueberry pancake distracted worry, and she thought about how when she was little she used to think her dad was just her dad, the pancake person, the homework helper, the one who sat in the car outside school dances he hadn't understood she was too young to be invited to yet. And then last year, Mrs. Ortega's car had broken down in the school parking lot, and her dad had fixed it in 20 minutes with stuff from the back of his truck. And Mrs. Ortega had looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, and Nora had thought, other people don't know. She'd always known, she thought. She'd just never thought about the fact that other people didn't. She ate her blueberry pancakes. Her dad stood by the window and looked at his phone and thought about whatever he was thinking about. Outside, the morning was gray and ordinary, and the city went about its business, and somewhere on Birchfield Avenue, a car that everyone had declared dead was waiting to be brought back to life. He finished the repair on Sunday. He'd ordered the correct sensor module through a parts supplier he'd worked with for years, a retired engineer named Walt Svoboda, who ran a specialty components business out of a warehouse in New Jersey, and who had, when Logan described what he needed and why, gone very quiet for a moment and then said, "Son, be careful," in a tone that Logan had been thinking about ever since. The installation itself was straightforward, mechanically speaking. The modules seated correctly, the connections were clean. The system reset took 40 minutes of careful sequencing because the ECU had logged the phantom errors and each one needed to be correctly cleared to avoid the system reading the correct sensor as a replacement anomaly. When it was done, he sat in the driver's seat for the first time. The car smelled expensive, leather, and something synthetic, with an undertone of the specific staleness of a vehicle that hadn't been driven in months. and he put the key in and turned it. The engine started on the first try. He sat there for a moment and listened to it run. It was a good engine, quiet and smooth and well-tuned, everything it was supposed to be, all the catastrophe stripped away to reveal the simple fact of a machine that worked. He thought about Walt Svoboda saying, "Be careful." And he thought about Vivian Sterling's face when he'd told her about the modification, the way she'd gone very still and then very precise, the way he recognized that kind of thinking because he'd once done a version of it himself, in a different context before his life had reorganized itself around different things. He turned the engine off. He took out his phone and called her. "It's running," he said. A pause, a single breath. "When can I come see it?" she said. "Now," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She was there in 15. Yatam. She didn't say anything for a moment when she heard the engine turn over. She stood beside the driver's door, which Logan had left open, and she listened. And whatever happened in her face in that moment was something she hadn't entirely gotten under control before it passed. It was only a second. Then it was gone. "Drive it," Logan said. "What?" "Take it for a drive. Go around the block. Make sure it feels right to you." She looked at him. "It's your car now. It runs when you're ready to believe it runs," he said. "Drive it." She drove it. She went around the block. He could hear the engine receding and then coming back, smooth and even. And when she came back and parked in front of the garage and got out, her face was different. Not softer exactly, but changed in some way he didn't have precise language for. "We need to talk about what comes next," she said. "Yes." "Not here." She looked around the garage, and it wasn't disdain, he thought. She wasn't a disdainful person in the way he'd initially assumed, watching her on the news and in the press coverage of the challenge. She was someone who assessed environments the way she assessed everything else, for what they were and weren't suited to. "Are you free for dinner?" He was about to say yes, and then he thought about Nora, and the expression on his face must have done something, because Vivian said immediately, "Or your daughter can come. I don't mind." He looked at her. "Clara ran a full background check when you called," she said. "Comes with the territory. I know you have an 8-year-old. Does that bother you?" "Why would it bother me?" He didn't answer that, because the honest answer was that many things bothered many people, and he'd spent enough years learning exactly which things about his situation bothered which categories of people that he'd stopped trying to predict it and just waited to find out. "She finishes soccer practice at 5, he said. "Then we'll eat at 6, Vivian said. "I know a place on Merton Street. Good burgers. Booths." A pause, and he thought he detected something in it. Not uncertainty exactly, more like consideration. "Kids like booths, right?" He looked at her. Vivian Sterling, 30 years old, $4.2 billion net worth, who had never once in his observation seemed uncertain about anything, was asking him if kids liked booths. "Yeah," he said, "kids like booths." She nodded, brisk and resolved. 6 o'clock, she said, and she got in the running car that was technically no longer hers and drove away. Logan stood in the mouth of the garage and watched her go. Behind him, the fluorescent lights hummed. Nora's drawing was still taped to the wall. The coffee machine had been making the same sound for 3 years. He thought about Walt Svoboda saying, "Be careful," and he thought about a tiny engineered component in a sealed plastic bag in the drawer of his tool chest. And he thought about 9% stock losses and merger timelines. And he felt, somewhere in his chest, the specific sensation of a door that had been closed for a long time beginning, very slightly, to open. He didn't know whether that was good or not yet. He went back to work. The restaurant on Merton Street was called Callahan's, and it had been there since before Vivian was born, which meant it had survived 3 recessions, 1 fire, and the complete transformation of the surrounding neighborhood from working class to trendy to something that couldn't decide what it was anymore. The booths were red vinyl, cracked in the corners and patched with electrical tape in 2 places, and the menus were laminated and slightly sticky, and the burgers were, objectively, excellent. Nora Hayes decided she liked it within approximately 45 seconds of walking through the door. "They have a milkshake menu," she said, studying the laminated card with the focused intensity of a person making a significant financial decision. "A whole separate menu, just for milkshakes." "That's correct," Vivian said. Nora looked up at her. She had been studying Vivian with the same focused intensity since Logan had introduced them in the parking lot outside the garage, with the frank and completely unselfconscious curiosity of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned that staring was rude. "Do you like milkshakes?" "I don't drink them often," Vivian said. "Why not?" "Nora," Logan said. "That's a real question, Dad. I'm not being rude." Nora looked back at Vivian. "I'm genuinely asking." Vivian looked at the child across the booth from her. Nora had her father's coloring and what Vivian suspected was her mother's way of holding herself. There was something in the directness of her gaze that felt like a different source. She was wearing a soccer jersey with a grass stain on the shoulder that Logan had apparently not managed to get out, and her hair was in a braid that was coming apart at the bottom, and she had the particular quality of children who had been raised with enough honesty to not have learned yet to perform politeness they didn't feel. "I don't like cold things much," Vivian said. Nora considered this. "That's a valid reason," she said, and went back to the menu. Logan caught Vivian's eye over the top of his own menu. His expression was the kind that didn't quite allow itself to be a smile but was in the vicinity of one. Vivian looked back down at her menu. They ordered. Nora got the chocolate milkshake and negotiated a side of onion rings in addition to her fries with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before and knew exactly which parental threshold she was working with. Logan got a burger and coffee. Vivian ordered the same burger and then changed the coffee to water and then changed it back to coffee when the server was already walking away and had to be called back, which was the most visibly uncertain thing Logan had seen her do and which she acknowledged with a brief expression that might, in someone else, have been embarrassment. "Long day," she said. "Yeah," he said. The server brought their drinks. Nora took a pull of the milkshake with the satisfaction of someone who had earned it. Logan wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "So," Vivian said, "the executives involved in the merger." "Nora knows I sometimes talk business at dinner," Logan said to Vivian. And then, to Nora, "This is going to be a business conversation for a little bit. You can listen or zone out, your choice." "I'll listen," Nora said, because she was 8 and curious, and her father had, by accident or design, raised her to think that interesting things were worth paying attention to. Vivian looked at Logan. "I pulled everything I could on the Nakamura deal," he said. He had spent the day at a laptop at the front desk of the garage, between customers, running searches that he suspected had put him on at least 2 financial news alert lists. Publicly available information only, shareholder filings, board meeting records, news coverage, the deal structure, the timeline. And? Your board has 11 members. 3 of them were publicly opposed to the Nakamura acquisition when it was announced. They went on record, 2 in trade publications, 1 in a shareholder's letter. He picked up his coffee. One of the 3 is a man named Gerald Thorne. Vivian's expression didn't change, but something in it sharpened. "Thorne has been on the board for 9 years, Logan continued. He holds about 4% of the company's stock personally, and he controls another 8% through a network of investment vehicles that took me about an hour to trace through the public filings." He paused. 2 of those investment vehicles are also listed as minority stakeholders in a private equity firm called Meridian Capital Partners. "I know Meridian," Vivian said. "I know you do. They made a non-binding offer to acquire a 20% stake in your company 14 months ago, which you declined." He set the mug down. "Shedis, your stock was at $114 when you turned them down. It's at $91 now." The table was quiet for a moment, except for the ambient noise of the restaurant and Nora's milkshake. "If someone were shorting Sterling Holdings stock," Vivian said carefully, "and they needed the price to drop another 10 to 15% to make the position significantly profitable. Delaying the Nakamura merger creates uncertainty. Uncertainty drives the stock down. If the stock drops below 85, your company becomes an attractive acquisition target for a firm that already expressed interest at a much higher valuation." He looked at her steadily. "That's not an accusation. That's a sequence of publicly available facts that describes a plausible motive." "Gerald Thorne," she said, "and possibly others. I don't have names. I have a direction." Vivian picked up her coffee and held it without drinking. She was doing that thing Logan had noticed before. The processing that looked from the outside like stillness, but was actually the opposite. Thorne doesn't have the technical knowledge to engineer that component, she said. No, but he has money and he has connections to the automotive sector through his investment portfolio. 3 of his funds have stakes in auto industry suppliers. Logan turned his coffee mug slowly on the table. One of those suppliers makes electronic control systems for vehicles. Vivian looked at him. I didn't find a direct line, he said. I want to be clear about that. What I found is a constellation of connections that could support a more direct investigation. Someone with actual forensic access to the financial records, and the component itself would know more. Someone like a corporate attorney and a forensic accountant. Someone like that, yes. She nodded slowly. Under the table, Logan could hear Nora quietly tapping her foot against the booth seat, the restless energy of an 8-year-old trying to sit still. Their food arrived. The server set everything down with the efficient friendliness of someone who had been doing the job long enough to be genuinely good at it. And Nora immediately organized her plates with the seriousness of a general preparing a campaign. You said you were at Corrigan, Vivian said when the server had moved on. Before. Yes. How long? 7 years. I started as an associate engineer straight out of grad school, left as a senior systems lead. He picked up his burger. It was a good place to work. The engineering culture there was serious. They cared about getting things right. I looked at Corrigan's assets during the bankruptcy, she said. The engineering division was extraordinary. The IP alone was worth considerably more than what it went for. It was. He said it without bitterness, which surprised him slightly, because there had been a period when it hadn't been without bitterness. A lot of good engineers scattered after. Some went to the big manufacturers, some started their own things. And you went to Birchfield Avenue. He ate his burger. And I went to Birchfield Avenue. Nora looked up from her onion rings. Mom died, she said to Vivian, with the directness of a child who had learned to say a hard thing plainly because the alternatives had been practiced and found wanting. So Dad stopped working the big job and opened the garage so he could be home more. Logan didn't say anything. He didn't look up. Vivian looked at Nora. I know, she said quietly. I'm sorry. It was when I was little, so I don't really remember her. But I have pictures. Nora went back to her onion rings. Dad says she was funny, funnier than him. That's a high bar, Vivian said. Logan looked up, then. There was the faintest edge of something in Vivian's voice that hadn't been there before. Not warmth exactly, because warmth implied softness. And Vivian wasn't soft, but something adjacent to it, something real. She was, he said. She was significantly funnier than me. Nora nodded with the authority of someone confirming established fact. He's kind of serious. I've noticed, Vivian said. I'm right here, Logan said. We know, Nora and Vivian said, at almost exactly the same moment. And then Nora laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of her. And Vivian's mouth did something that was probably the closest it got to doing the same thing. And Logan sat back in the cracked red vinyl booth and drank his coffee and thought, very quietly, that this was the strangest dinner he'd been to in a long time. Well, they talked for 2 hours. The restaurant filled up and then began to clear out again. And the server refilled their coffees twice without being asked. And Nora, who had eaten everything on her plates with the efficiency of a competitive athlete, eventually put her head down on her folded arms and fell mostly asleep against the wall side of the booth, in the way of children who simply exit consciousness when they've used up their day. The business talk had shifted, somewhere around the second coffee, into something less structured. Not personal, exactly, but less defended. Tell me about the Nakamura deal, Logan said. Not the parts I read in the filings, what it actually is. Vivian looked at him. Why? Because I've been helping you work a problem I only understand half of, he said. And because you asked me to help figure out who did this, which means I need to understand what was worth doing it to stop. She was quiet for a moment, in the specific way of someone accustomed to not explaining themselves, deciding whether to make an exception. Nakamura Holdings is a Japanese conglomerate, she said. 70 years old, deeply private, family-controlled, doesn't do many deals. When they approached us, It was because they'd been watching our trajectory for 3 years, and they thought we could do something together in the clean energy infrastructure space. She turned her coffee mug in her hands. The acquisition gives my company access to Nakamura's manufacturing network in Southeast Asia and their R&D portfolio, which is significant. It gives Nakamura a foothold in the American market through our distribution channels. And the stock impact? At announcement, the stock went up 6%. The market liked it. Something moved across her face. Then the delays started. A missed meeting, an unclear term sheet, questions about valuation that should have been settled already. Each piece of friction felt small, but the accumulated effect made the market nervous. Made everyone nervous. She paused. Including the Nakamura family. They're traditional. They value reliability. When my company starts looking unstable, they start asking questions about whether this is the right partnership. So the sabotage was layered, Logan said. Your car breaks down the night of the preliminary terms meeting. The optics are chaotic. A billionaire's car fails dramatically. She misses an important meeting. It's news. Then the challenge you put out becomes a public embarrassment when nobody can fix it. More news, none of it flattering. While Thorne, or whoever is positioned to benefit, is shorting the stock and watching the Nakamura people get cold feet, Vivian finished. And if the deal collapses, the stock drops hard. And a company with depressed stock and a failed high-profile deal is a much easier acquisition target. She looked at her coffee. They'd have to move on it before I could recover, which means the hostile takeover play would come within, she calculated, 6 to 8 weeks of the deal formally falling apart. Logan thought about the component in the sealed bag in his tool chest. He thought about how precisely it had been made. Not sloppily, not rushed. Someone had taken real time with it, real care. The kind of care that suggested they were confident about their timeline. We need to move fast, he said. Yes, and carefully. If Thorne knows you're looking at him, he'll move the pieces, she said. I know. She looked up. I have attorneys I trust and a forensic accountant I've worked with before. But I need the component as physical evidence, and I need an expert who can testify to what it is and how it was made. Logan looked at her. I need you, she said. It came out evenly, matter of fact, the way Vivian said most things. But he'd been paying attention all evening, and he had started to learn the difference between the things she said automatically and the things that cost her something to say. This one cost her something. She didn't ask for things easily. Okay, he said. There's a risk in that, she said. If they know you're involved, you become a problem they need to deal with. I figured. I'm saying it directly because you have a daughter. He looked at Nora, asleep against the wall of the booth, her braid entirely undone now, her soccer jersey with its permanent grass stain rising and falling with her breathing. 8 years old, the person for whom everything else organized itself. I know, he said. I figured that too. He'd been figuring it since Walt Svoboda had said be careful. He'd been figuring it since he'd looked at the component under magnification and understood what he was looking at. Some part of him had known, before he'd even called Vivian, that this wasn't a problem he was going to be able to hand over and walk away from, because whoever had built that component hadn't made it to be found, and the fact that he'd found it anyway was going to matter to them. Tell me about your security, he said. She looked slightly surprised, which was the most surprised he'd seen her look. My security? Personal security. Do you have people? I have a detail. 2 people, usually 3 when I'm traveling. Are they on tonight? She looked at him for a beat. There's a car outside. He nodded. I want to move the component tomorrow, out of the garage, somewhere I choose that nobody else knows about yet. I can arrange a secure location. Not yet, he said. If your systems have been compromised, if Thorne has someone inside your organization, which I think is likely given how the service appointment was coordinated, then anywhere that goes through your infrastructure is potentially visible. He paused. I know a person. Retired engineer, trustworthy, has secure storage. I'll move it there first, and then we figure out the chain of custody with your attorneys. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. He could see her evaluating, the way she evaluated everything, not distrustfully, but thoroughly. All right, she said. I'll need a few days to get everything properly documented. The photos I took, the specifications, the the comparison to the OEM part. He finished his coffee. And I want to go back through the service record from the dealership, the specific technician who worked on your car that day. I can have Clara pull that, without going through any system that Thorne might have access to. She nodded, and he could see her adjusting internally the way she was accustomed to operating, through her infrastructure, through her team, through the systems she had built, and recognizing that some of those systems were now uncertain ground. He thought that must be a strange sensation for her. He thought she was handling it well, which probably meant she had been through uncertain ground before. She had. He'd read enough about her to know that. Nora made a sound in her sleep. Logan glanced at her. She had shifted slightly, pressing her cheek against the vinyl seat back, and her expression in sleep was the same uncomplicated expression it had been since she was an infant, peaceful in a way that he had never stopped finding extraordinary, given that he was her father and did not experience most things peacefully. "She's easy to be around," Vivian said. He looked up. Vivian was watching Nora with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. "She's easy to be around because she's exactly what she is," he said. "No performance. She hasn't learned to perform yet." He paused. "I'm trying to keep it that way as long as possible." "How long does that last?" "I don't know. I'm working without a map." He turned his coffee mug on the table. Her mother would have known. She was good at people in a way I'm not. I'm better with machines. He hadn't meant to say that much. It came out the way things sometimes did at the end of a long day, when the filters weren't working at full capacity. Vivian was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth," she said, "from an outside perspective, you seem to be doing all right." He looked at her. She wasn't performing comfort. She was stating an observation, the way she stated everything. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once and looked back at her coffee. The garage was vandalized 2 nights later. Logan found it at 6:15 in the morning when he came in ahead of Nora's wake-up time, which was his usual routine. The quiet hour before the day started, coffee from the French press, the garage to himself. He pulled onto Birchfield and saw the bay door, which he had locked the night before, standing open. His first thought was that the latch had given. It was old and he'd been meaning to replace it for a year. His second thought came when his headlights swept across the interior and he saw what had been done. Not destruction, exactly. Not the kind of vandalism that was about anger. The tool chest had been opened, the locks were not high-end, and gone through methodically. Drawers left open, contents disturbed but not thrown around. The workbench had been cleared of most of what was on it. Again, methodically, items pushed aside or removed rather than scattered. They had been looking for something. He sat in his truck for a moment with the engine running and his hands on the wheel and thought through what he knew. The component was not in the garage. He had moved it 3 days ago to Walt Svoboda's storage unit in New Jersey, which Walt had driven down to receive personally and which no one else on Earth knew about yet. The documentation, the photographs, the specifications, the comparison analysis, was on a drive that had not been in the garage since Sunday. They hadn't found it, but they had looked. He called Vivian at 6:20. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already awake, which somehow did not surprise him. "The garage was broken into last night," he said. A pause. Not a long one. "Are you there now?" "Parking lot." "Don't go in. I'm calling the police and my security team. Stay where you are." "Vivian?" "Logan." Her voice was not loud, but it was the voice she used when she had decided something and the deciding was finished. "Stay in the truck." He stayed in the truck. He sat there in the gray early morning on Birchfield Avenue, outside the tire shop and the laundromat and the Mexican restaurant with the hand-lettered sign, and he thought about what it meant that they had moved this fast. He had expected them to be careful. He had expected more time. The fact that they hadn't been careful, that they had broken into his garage 4 days after he'd fixed the car, told him something important. It told him they were not as confident as they appeared. It told him they were worried. And worried people made mistakes. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "My team is 12 minutes out, security and an attorney. Do not call local police before they arrive." He texted back, "Understood." Then he texted Nora's after-school coordinator. A retired teacher named Mrs. Beaumont, who lived 2 streets over and had been a lifeline since Nora started second grade, and arranged for Nora to go straight to Mrs. Beaumont's after school today, just in case the day ran long. Mrs. Beaumont texted back a thumbs up and a heart emoji, which was her standard response to everything Logan sent her, and which he had come to find genuinely comforting. He sat in the truck and watched the sun come up over Birchfield Avenue. At 6:32, a black SUV pulled up and 2 people got out. A woman in a suit who moved with the economy of someone with security training, and a man in a coat carrying a briefcase who had attorney written all over him. Vivian arrived 4 minutes after that in her own car, alone, without the details she'd mentioned, which meant she had come directly from wherever she'd been rather than waiting for them to pick her up. She was in clothes that looked like she'd put them on quickly in the dark. Her hair wasn't quite finished. She looked, Logan thought, like a person rather than a profile. She came straight to his truck and knocked on the window. He rolled it down.
"You okay?" she said. "Fine," he said. They didn't find anything. Some of the tension in her jaw eased, not all of it. "They're going to know that soon." "I know." "Which means they'll try something else." "I know," he said again. She looked at him through the truck window for a moment, in the thin early light of the morning, on a street she would never have set foot on a month ago, in borrowed time that was growing shorter, and something moved through her expression that she didn't entirely suppress this time. "I'm sorry," she said, "that this came to your garage." He looked at her. "Don't be sorry. Be ready." She held his gaze. "I'm always ready," she said, and the way she said it was not a performance. It was just true. The attorney was waiting by the bay door. The security woman had already walked the perimeter. The morning was getting lighter by the minute, the city waking up around them, ordinary and indifferent, and somewhere inside a network of financial instruments and board maneuverings and a tiny engineered component in a New Jersey storage unit, the thing that they had started was beginning to gather its own momentum. Logan got out of the truck. The attorney's name was Raymond Chu, and he had been Vivian's outside counsel on sensitive matters for 6 years, which meant he had learned to arrive at unusual situations without visible reaction. He walked through the vandalized garage with a small flashlight and a yellow legal pad, making notes in a handwriting that Logan suspected nobody but Raymond could read. And he didn't ask unnecessary questions, which Logan appreciated. The security woman was Dana Reyes. She documented everything with a camera that was more serious than a phone camera, photographing each disturbed drawer and displaced tool with the methodical patience of someone who understood that the difference between useful evidence and useless evidence was often just framing and light. Logan walked them through what had been where. He was precise about it because precision mattered, and because precision was how he thought. The same instinct that had let him see the modification in the sensor module. The ability to hold a detailed picture of a thing in his head and notice when something in it had changed. They were looking for something specific, Dana said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Logan said. Did they find it? No. She looked at him steadily. She had the look of someone who had been told partial truths by clients before and had learned to ask questions whose answers would reveal which kind of truth she was getting. Is the thing they were looking for currently in this garage? No, he said again. It's in a secure location. Raymond looked up from his legal pad. We'll need it. I know. I need to bring someone into the chain of custody first. Someone I trust. Raymond and Dana exchanged a look. The kind of look that people who worked together for a long time exchanged without deciding to, full of compressed communication. Then Raymond looked back at his legal pad and wrote something. Vivian had been standing near the workbench, not touching anything, watching the documentation process with the focused quiet of someone who processed difficulty by getting very still rather than very loud. When Logan looked at her, she looked back at him. Walt Svoboda, she said, low enough that it was just for him. He hadn't told her Walt's name. He had said a person I trust, and she had let it go, the night of the restaurant, because she was smart enough to know when not to push. But she had, apparently, been thinking about it. How'd you get there? He said. You mentioned a retired engineer. Corrigan had a components liaison who retired about 5 years ago,
around the time the company started having financial trouble.
His name was in the engineering team records I pulled. She paused.
I didn't confirm it. I was waiting to see if you'd tell me. Logan looked at her for a moment. He thought about the gap between knowing something and waiting to be told it, and what that gap cost a person like Vivian, who clearly found waiting for information considerably more difficult than acquiring it. Walt Svoboda, he said. He's in New Jersey. He has the component and the documentation. She nodded. Raymond. Raymond was already writing. They were out of the garage by 9. Logan had 2 customers with morning appointments who arrived to find the bay doors open, and Logan in the parking lot with a woman in a suit and a man with a legal pad and a general air of something having happened. He rescheduled both of them, apologizing briefly and sincerely, and they left with the particular graciousness of regulars who had been coming long enough to know that Logan Hayes ran a reliable operation and that if something was wrong, it was not the ordinary kind of wrong. He drove Nora to school. She had not been in the garage that morning, had woken up and found him already on the phone, and had eaten her cereal and watched him with the careful eyes of a child calibrating how worried to be. He had told her the truth, abbreviated. Someone had broken into the garage looking for something. Everything was okay. The something was not there. Are we safe? She said. He had considered for a half second the automatic reassurance. Then he thought about the kind of person he was trying to raise. I think so, he said, but I'm being careful. She nodded. She ate the last of her cereal. Is the lady helping? Vivian? Yes. She seems smart. She is. Is she nice? He thought about that. She's trying, he said, which was, he thought, the most honest answer. Nora appeared to find this satisfactory. She picked up her backpack and her lunch and kissed his cheek, quickly, with the efficiency of someone who had decided affection was fine, but time was finite, and got out of the car. He sat in the school drop-off lane and watched her walk through the front doors and thought about, I think so, but I'm being careful, and whether that was true, and what he would do if it became less true. Then he pulled out of the lane and drove to meet Vivian. She had set up a temporary workspace in a private conference room at a law office downtown. Not her own company's offices, specifically, because Raymond had flagged that her building's security logs were visible to board members, including Thorne, through a provision in the company's governance structure that had been standard practice and was now a liability. The law office was on the 14th floor of a glass building on Commerce Street and had the mild airlessness of spaces that existed entirely for work. No windows that opened, good lighting, a table long enough for 6 people, and a coffee service that Raymond had arranged without being asked. Walt Svoboda joined by video from New Jersey, his camera pointed slightly too high so that what they mostly saw was his chin and the shelves of components and reference books behind him, which he had been told 3 times to adjust and had not adjusted. He was 71 years old and had the physical presence of someone who had spent decades around heavy machinery. Broad through the shoulders, economical with his words, with the hands of a man who still used them for actual work. Logan, he said when the call connected, you look tired. I'm fine, Walt. You don't look fine. You look like you've been sleeping in your truck. He peered at the camera, which pointed his chin more aggressively at the ceiling. Is this the Sterling woman? Mr. Svoboda, Vivian said. You're younger than I thought, Walt said. That's not a compliment or a criticism, just a fact. He shifted in his chair. The component is in my storage unit in a sealed evidence bag. I have not opened it since Logan gave it to me. Chain of custody is clean. Raymond leaned forward slightly. Mr. Svoboda, I need to understand your professional qualifications as they relate to the component. I spent 31 years as a components engineer and manufacturing liaison. 14 of them at Corrigan, the rest in the supply chain. I know every major supplier of ECU-adjacent sensor hardware in North America, and I know several in East Asia. He paused. And I know who doesn't make what Logan described to me. The room sharpened. What do you mean? Vivian said. When Logan called me about the specs, Walt said, I started running through suppliers. The base component, the OEM part that was modified, that's made by a company called Veltec Systems. Standard supplier, good reputation, Their stuff is in half the luxury vehicles manufactured in the last 5 years. He scratched his jaw. The modification itself, the replacement piece inside the housing, that's not a commercial component. That's custom fabricated. Logan, who had heard the beginning of this the day he'd brought the component to New Jersey, but not the full analysis, sat forward. Custom how? The material composition, the circuit architecture. Somebody machined that piece specifically for this application, which means one of two things. Either there's a very sophisticated individual involved who has both the engineering knowledge and the fabrication capability, or there's a small manufacturer or lab that produced it to spec. Walt's chin tilted toward the screen. And producing something to spec means someone wrote the spec, which means there's a document somewhere. Raymond made a note. Can you identify the fabrication source? Vivian asked. I can narrow it down, Walt said. The material tolerances, the machining marks I can see in Logan's photographs, they're consistent with a handful of facilities I know of. I'd want the physical component to be more precise. But I can give you a short list. How short? 3, maybe 4 facilities in North America that have the capability and would likely take a custom job without extensive documentation requirements. A pause that carried something in it. 2 of them have done work for automotive sector clients that I know of from my years in the supply chain. Vivian looked at Raymond. Raymond was already writing. Then she looked at Logan. Thorne's investment portfolio, she said. You said 3 of his funds have stakes in auto industry suppliers. One of them is a company called Castlegate Industrial Partners, Logan said. It's a private equity vehicle. It has minority stakes in 7 companies, 2 of which are components manufacturers. The silence in the conference room lasted about 4 seconds, which was, Logan thought, almost exactly how long it took a highly intelligent person to run the available connections and understand what they added up to. That's not evidence, Raymond said. No, Logan agreed, but it's a direction. We need the fabrication source confirmed, Raymond said, and we need a financial connection between Thorne and whoever ordered the component. The component itself proves sabotage. The financial connection proves who ordered it. Which means we need access to records that are not publicly available, Vivian said. That's correct. She was quiet for a moment, and Logan watched her think. It was something he had started to notice, the quality of her thinking, the way it moved. He was good at sequential reasoning, at understanding systems and tracing causes through to effects. Vivian's thinking was different. It was spatial, almost, the way she held multiple variables and rotated them against each other until an arrangement revealed itself. He could see it happening in the set of her expression and the particular quality of her stillness. The shareholders' meeting, she said. Raymond looked up. It's in 18 days, she said. It was already scheduled. It's the quarterly meeting, the one where the Nakamura deal was supposed to be formally ratified. Her voice was level. If we're going to do this, we do it there, publicly, with documentation. Vivian. Raymond set down his pen. If we go to the shareholders' meeting with incomplete evidence, then we need complete evidence in 18 days, she said. That is not a reasonable... Raymond! She said his name the way she said most names, with the precision of a person who was about to make a point they had already fully thought through. If we take this through normal legal channels, through investigation and discovery and filing and response, it takes months. And in months, the Nakamura deal is dead, and whoever is behind this has had time to cover their tracks and reposition and laugh at us from whatever beach they've chosen. She picked up her coffee. 18 days. Shareholders meeting. We present the evidence directly to the board, in public, in a forum where Thorne cannot delay or deflect because the cameras are on and the shareholders are in the room. Raymond looked at her for a long moment. He was, Logan thought, a man who had spent 6 years watching Vivian Sterling make calls that seemed too fast and too aggressive, and then watching them work. We'll need the fabrication source confirmed, Raymond said. We'll need at least one financial connection documented, and we'll need an expert who can explain the component to a non-technical audience. He said this last part looking at Logan. Logan looked back at him. I can do that. Walt's chin moved on the screen. I'll start on the short list today, he said. If Logan can get me the physical component back, I can have preliminary fabrication analysis in 72 hours. The chain of custody for the physical component needs to go through my office once you're done, Raymond said. I'll arrange secure transport. Fine, Walt said. One more thing. A pause. Logan, these people broke into your garage. They did it fast, inside a week of you fixing the car. That means somebody's been watching you since you stepped forward with the challenge. The conference room was quiet. I know, Logan said, and they'll know by now that they didn't find what they were looking for, Walt said. So what comes next is either they back off because they're scared, or they don't back off because they're more scared of the alternative. Which option do you think is more likely? Vivian asked. Walt's chin pointed at the ceiling for a moment. In my experience, people who go to the trouble of engineering a component that's sophisticated don't scare easy, he said. They've already decided this is worth doing. That doesn't change just because one step didn't work. He signed off. His chin disappeared from the screen. The three of them, Logan, Vivian, Raymond, sat around the conference room table in the air-conditioned quiet of the 14th floor. He's right, Vivian said. Yes, Logan said. Which means we need to talk about your security. We talked about this. We talked about it, and then someone broke into your garage, she said, with the directness of a person who believed in naming things accurately. That conversation needs to happen again with a different conclusion. He looked at her. He understood what she was offering, and he understood why. And he also understood that accepting it meant a particular kind of entanglement that he had not had in his life for a long time, and that there was a part of him that balked at it on instinct. The same part that had turned down every well-meaning suggestion after Anna died that he should take help, accept support, let people in. Dana can do a security assessment of the garage and the house, Vivian said. Not permanent surveillance, just an assessment of what needs to change. All right, he said. She looked slightly surprised that he hadn't pushed back more. He noticed this. I have a daughter, he said simply. She nodded. She looked briefly like she wanted to say something else, and then she didn't. The next 9 days were the strangest of Logan's recent life, which was saying something because the preceding weeks had already covered considerable unusual ground. He ran the garage. He had two. The mortgage on the building was real, and the bills were real, and his two full-time customers and the steady walk-in traffic of the neighborhood were what kept the lights on. He opened at 7 and worked until 4, and then got Nora from Mrs. Beaumont's, or from school, depending on the day, and made dinner and helped with homework and listened to an extended narrative about a conflict in her friend group that seemed to involve a borrowed bracelet and several layers of social complexity that he followed approximately half of. He also spent 2 to 3 hours every evening in the back office of the garage, on the phone or video call with Raymond or Walt or Vivian, working through the evidence chain that they were building piece by piece with the focused slowness of people who could not afford to get anything wrong. Walt confirmed the fabrication source on day 4. One of the 3 facilities on his short list, a precision machining operation in Delaware called Harkin Industrial, had the specific tooling signatures that matched the modified component. Harkin Industrial was small, private, and had done custom work for clients in the automotive sector without extensive paper trails. Raymond had a contact in the financial due diligence world who confirmed, after 2 days of careful inquiry, that Harkin had received 2 payments in the previous year from a shell company registered in Delaware called NX Strategic Group. NX Strategic Group's registered agent was a law firm. The law firm had 4 clients. One of them was Gerald Thorne. Raymond called Logan at 11:15 on a Tuesday night to tell him this. How solid is it? Logan asked. He was in the garage back office, the lights down low, the street outside quiet. The connection exists, Raymond said. Whether it's admissible and what it proves are separate questions, but the connection exists. Does Vivian know? I'm calling her next. A pause that was unusual for Raymond, who was not a pausing kind of person. This is starting to look real, Logan. It was always real. I mean, legally real, actionable real. Another pause. If this goes to the shareholders' meeting and it works, it becomes a significant event, the kind that gets attention. I know. And if it doesn't work, if we miscalculate, if Thorne has prepared a counter, if the evidence looks thinner in that room than it does on paper. Raymond, Logan said, there are consequences for everyone involved that I need you to understand. I understand them. You have a daughter, Raymond said, which was what everyone kept saying, as if he were somehow unaware of this fact. I know I have a daughter, Logan said, more sharply than he intended. Then, more evenly, I know. I've thought about it. I'm still in. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said, and then, in a tone that was not quite Raymond's usual register. She's lucky to have you for a father. Logan sat with that for a moment. Good night, Raymond, he said. He sat in the back office for a while after that, in the dark and the quiet, with the street noise of Birchfield Avenue coming through the walls. He thought about Anna, which he did more rarely now than he once had, not because the grief had ended, but because it had changed, become a thing he carried rather than a thing that carried him. He thought about what she would have said about all of this, the sensor module and the shareholders meeting and Vivian Sterling eating a burger at Callahan's and asking Nora if kids liked booths. She would have laughed, he thought, not unkindly. She would have laughed and said, only you, Logan, I swear to everything, only you, in the way she'd said things when the world was being stranger than usual. He missed her differently at different times. He missed her competence and her laugh and the fact that she had known him well enough to find him funny. He missed having someone who understood the whole picture of him, not just the mechanic part or the father part or the engineer part. He sat in the dark for another 5 minutes. Then he turned the lights back on and went back to work. On the 11th day, Nora's school called at 2:15 in the afternoon. Logan was under a Subaru with a brake issue when his phone rang. He saw the school's number and slid out from under the car and answered it with the specific attention shift that school numbers required. The assistant principal's name was Mr. Delgado, and he was a calm man by nature. And he was calm now, but there was something underneath the calm. Mr. Hayes, Nora's fine. I want to say that first. The specific way parents' hearts contract when an authority figure says a child is fine before saying anything else. What happened? Logan said. There was a man outside the school at pickup this afternoon. One of our monitors asked him to leave the school property perimeter, which he did without incident. But Nora said he had been asking her questions while she was waiting for your text about your arrival time. What kind of questions? About you. About your work. She said he asked if you'd recently worked on a nice car. A pause. Nora told him her dad worked on lots of cars and that she wasn't allowed to talk to strangers. And then she went inside to the front office. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. Logan was already walking toward his truck. She's in the front office now. She's fine. She seems more annoyed than scared, honestly. A brief, uncertain pause. She's been asking for a milkshake. He called Vivian while he drove. She picked up in one ring. They went near Nora, he said. 3 seconds of silence, then, I'm sending Dana to the school right now. Don't hang up. He heard her talking to someone on another line, brief and precise. Then she was back. Dana will be there in 8 minutes. She'll stay with Nora until you arrive. Logan, her voice changed slightly, the specific change he had learned to listen for, the one that meant she was setting something aside in order to say the thing beneath it. I'm sorry. This is because of me. It's because of whoever sent that man, he said. Logan, don't, he said. Don't apologize for other people's choices. That's not useful right now. He turned onto the avenue that led to the school. What is useful is that we don't have 18 days anymore. No, she said. We don't. How fast can Raymond move the shareholders' meeting? It's already scheduled. I'm calling Raymond now to talk about how we present what we have. What we have is good, Logan. It's enough. It needs to be more than enough. It needs to be undeniable. I know. He pulled into the school parking lot. Through the front window of the building, he could see Nora sitting in the front office with her backpack on, talking to the receptionist. Even through the glass and the distance, he could see she was fine. The way she held herself, the way she was gesturing while she talked, with that quality she'd always had of being fully present in whatever moment she was in. His hands were shaking slightly on the wheel. He looked at them. He made them stop. Logan? Vivian's voice. I'm at the school. Go get your daughter. I'll handle everything else right now. You handle that. He got out of the truck. He walked through the front doors. Nora looked up from the receptionist's desk and saw him, and her face did the thing it did, that immediate ease, the recalibration of a child who had been managing without their person and could now stop managing. Dad, she said. Hey, Bug. She crossed the office and he met her halfway, and she let him hold her longer than she usually would, her face against his shoulder, her backpack still on, and he felt the particular weight of her, 8 years old and solid and entirely herself, and he held on. I told him I don't talk to strangers, she said into his shoulder. I know, Delgado told me. You did exactly right. He was asking about your car stuff. I know. She pulled back enough to look at him. Her expression was not scared. It was, as Mr. Delgado had said, more annoyed. The specific annoyance of someone who felt their time had been wasted by an adult behaving stupidly. Are we okay? We're okay, he said. And this time, unlike that morning in the kitchen, he said it without the qualifier. Because they were. Because he was going to make sure of it. Dana arrived a minute later. She assessed the situation and the school's perimeter with the quiet efficiency that Logan had come to rely on, and she arranged for additional monitoring through her firm for the remainder of the school week. Logan drove Nora home. She got her milkshake. They stopped at the place on Fuller Street that she'd been to twice before, and she talked about the bracelet conflict, which had evolved new dimensions since morning, and about a science project due Friday, and about whether their neighbor Mrs. Beaumont's cat was becoming less hostile to her, or whether she was imagining it. He listened to all of it. He drove. He let the ordinary run of it settle over him like something protective. That night, after Nora was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and he thought about what Walt had said, about people who build something that's sophisticated, not scaring easy, about them having decided this is worth doing. He thought about that, and he thought about a man standing outside a school asking an 8-year-old about her father's work. And he thought, fine, if they wanted to make it about this, about his daughter, about Birchfield Avenue, about a life he had built quietly and without any desire for a fight, then they had chosen the wrong leverage. Because the only thing more stubborn than a man with nothing to lose was a man with one specific, very small, very important thing to protect. He picked up his phone and called Vivian. We go to the shareholders' meeting, he said. I know, she said. She'd been awake. He hadn't doubted it. Raymond's been on it for 2 hours. Whatever we have, it has to be enough. It will be, she said. And then, because she was Vivian and she did not make promises lightly, I'll make it enough. He believed her. He sat in the quiet kitchen of the house on the edge of the city, and he finished his cold coffee, and he thought about the next 7 days. The 7 days before the shareholders' meeting were the kind of days that compressed time in both directions, each hour feeling too long and the whole week feeling like it was gone before it started. Raymond worked 18-hour days without complaining about it, which Logan respected. He had assembled a presentation package that Raymond described as legally conservative but factually devastating, which was how Raymond talked about things he was confident in. The package contained Walt's fabrication analysis, the financial connection between NX Strategic Group and Gerald Thorne, the service records from the Meridian dealership with the specific technician identified, a man named Paul Garrett, who had, in the 2 weeks since the garage break-in, quietly resigned his position and could no longer be reached at his listed address, and Logan's own technical documentation of the modified component, photographed and annotated and cross-referenced against the OEM specification in language that Raymond had asked him to revise 3 times until it was precise without being inaccessible. You write like an engineer, Raymond told him during the second revision session, which they conducted over video call at 10 at night. I am an engineer, Logan said. You write like one who assumes the reader already knows what you know, Raymond said. The shareholders are not engineers. Some of them are barely attentive. You need to write it so that someone who drove to that meeting thinking mainly about the lunch afterward can follow the argument. Logan revised it again. It was better. Vivian had her own parallel work. She spent the days before the meeting managing the company in the normal run of things, earnings reports, personnel decisions, the ongoing careful communication with the Nakamura team that had become, over the preceding weeks, the most delicate professional relationship she had ever maintained. She had told the Nakamura family's representative, a measured man named Takashi Inoue, that there had been a complication and that she was managing it and that the deal remained her priority. Takashi Inoue had said he appreciated her directness and that the family was patient. He had said it in a way that meant the family's patience was not infinite. "How patient?" Logan asked when she relayed this. "Patient enough for one more delay," she said. "Not two. So the shareholders' meeting has to work." "The shareholders' meeting has to work," she confirmed. She said it the way she said most serious things, not dramatically, just as a statement of fact. Logan had come to understand that this was how Vivian handled high stakes, by converting them into problems with defined parameters, because a defined problem could be addressed and an undefined one could only be feared. He thought it was a useful quality. He also thought it probably cost her something, in the private spaces where she wasn't performing competence for anyone, and he didn't ask about those spaces, but he thought about them sometimes. The night before the meeting, he couldn't sleep. He got up at 2 in the morning and went downstairs and stood in the kitchen for a while, and then he went out to the garage attached to the house. Not the shop on Birchfield, but the 2-car garage at home where he kept tools for personal projects, and where, when Nora was small and couldn't sleep, he used to take her to sit on the workbench while he sorted hardware, because the small, repetitive sounds of organizing screws and bolts by size had, for reasons neither of them could explain, reliably put her to sleep within 20 minutes. He turned on the work light. He sat on the stool he kept by the bench. He sorted nothing. He just sat. His phone was on the bench. At 2:40, it lit up with a text from Vivian. "Still up?" He looked at it. He typed back, "Yes." A pause. Then, "Me too." He stared at the phone for a moment. Then he called her because it was 2:40 in the morning and the meeting was in 8 hours, and he was sitting in his garage not sleeping, and there didn't seem to be much point in the formality of text. She picked up immediately. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. A moment of quiet. Not uncomfortable. They had gotten past the kind of quiet that needed to be filled. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for a week," he said. "Readiness isn't the issue." "What's the issue?" He thought about how to say it. "I've built careful things before," he said. "Good systems, correct systems, and I've watched them fail anyway because the world isn't a controlled environment." He picked up a socket wrench from the bench just to have something in his hands. "The evidence is solid. The argument is clear. That doesn't mean Thorne doesn't have something we haven't thought of." "He probably does," Vivian said. "He's been doing this for 9 years. He knows that room better than almost anyone." "That doesn't worry you?" "It worries me constantly," she said. "I've just had a lot of practice being worried and functional at the same time." He almost laughed. "Not quite." "That's a skill." "It's more of a necessity." A pause. "Logan, what we have is real. It's documentable and it's coherent and it connects. That's not nothing." "No," he agreed. "And you can explain the component better than anyone," she said. "You found it. You understood it when 6 other people didn't. That matters in that room. It will matter to the people sitting there." "I'm not a public speaker." "You're a person who knows what he's talking about and can say it plainly. That's better than a public speaker." Another pause, and he heard her shift. The sound of someone adjusting their position, perhaps in bed, perhaps on a couch, and the small, ordinary humanness of it. "I've been in a lot of rooms full of people who could speak beautifully and say absolutely nothing true." He turned the socket wrench in his hand. "How many of those rooms?" "More than I'd like." She was quiet for a moment. "I grew up around people who were very good at the presentation of things. My father was... He could make a room love him. He could make a room believe anything." The quality in her voice shifted, just slightly. "The company went bankrupt when I was 16. There was never as much there as everyone believed." He didn't say anything. He understood this was not an easy thing to say, and that saying it to him at 2 in the morning before the most consequential meeting of her professional life was a specific kind of trust. "That's why you care so much about what's real," he said. Not a question. "I care about what holds up," she said, "under pressure, without the presentation layer." A beat. What you found holds up. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. They stayed on the phone for another few minutes, not talking much, just present in the 2:40 in the morning quiet. Then Vivian said she should try to sleep, and he agreed, and they hung up, and he sat in the garage a little longer before going back inside. He slept for 4 hours. It was enough. Yeah. The Sterling Holdings quarterly shareholders meeting was held in a conference center on the 31st floor of a building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city in the mid-morning light. There were 112 shareholders registered in attendance, plus board members, plus the company's senior executive team, plus media observers in the back rows. Financial press, mostly. The people who covered corporate governance, who had come because Vivian had sent a communication the previous evening indicating that there would be a significant announcement regarding the company's strategic direction and the status of the Nakamura acquisition. Gerald Thorne arrived at 9:15, 12 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. Logan, seated toward the side of the room with Raymond, watched him come in. Thorne was 63 years old, silver-haired, built in the way of men who had been athletic 20 years ago and carried the memory of it. He moved through the room with the ease of someone who had attended hundreds of these meetings and found them generally predictable. He spoke briefly to 2 other board members. He accepted a cup of coffee from a server. He did not look toward Logan or Raymond. Logan studied him. He had the strange experience, familiar from his engineering days when a complex problem was finally in front of him physically rather than on a screen, of seeing a thing that had existed only as abstraction suddenly become concrete. For weeks, Thorne had been a name in filings, a pattern in financial records, a motive in a theory. Now he was a man in a gray suit drinking coffee and chatting with colleagues like he had no reason to feel anything other than ordinary about today. Either he was very confident, Logan thought, or he didn't know yet how much they had.
He doesn't know, Raymond said quietly beside him. He had followed Logan's gaze. You sure? If he knew, he wouldn't be here, Raymond said. He'd be managing the situation from somewhere else. Logan considered this. It was possible. It was also possible that Thorne was exactly the kind of person who was most dangerous when he was underestimating you, and that the confidence was real, not performed, because he had genuinely not considered that a mechanic on Birchfield Avenue could put together what Logan had put together. Vivian entered the room at 9:25. She came in with Elena Park, her communications director, and 2 members of her legal team, and she moved through the space with the particular quality that Logan had noticed the first time he saw her in his garage. Not arrogance, exactly, but a complete absence of uncertainty about whether she belonged. She spoke briefly to the room's moderator. She acknowledged several shareholders. She crossed to Logan and Raymond and spoke with Raymond for 90 seconds about sequencing. She didn't look nervous. He knew she was. He had been on the phone with her at 2:40 in the morning. You ready? She said to him. Yes, he said. When Raymond introduces the technical evidence portion, you'll have the floor, she said. Take as much time as you need. Don't rush it. I won't. She looked at him for a moment in the specific way she had started looking at him in the last few weeks when she was not performing anything, a direct, level look that carried more in it than he always knew what to do with. Thank you, she said. Whatever happens. Let's make sure something good happens, he said. She nodded once and went to take her seat at the front of the room. Bob. The meeting opened at 9:30 with standard procedural matters that Logan mostly didn't listen to. He was watching the room. He was watching Thorne. He was going through the sequence in his head the way he went through a repair sequence before he started, visualizing each step, identifying where the resistance points were, figuring out in advance which movements required the most precision. The Nakamura deal was formally on the agenda as item 3. When the moderator reached it, Vivian stood. Before we address the formal ratification, she said, I need to bring the board and shareholders something that has material relevance to this company's recent financial performance and to the circumstances surrounding the merger timeline. She was clear and level, the way she always was. 3 months ago, my car broke down on Route 9 while I was en route to a preliminary terms meeting with the Nakamura team. You're aware of this. It received significant press coverage. A slight pause. What you are not aware of is what was subsequently discovered about why the car broke down. I'd like our outside counsel to present that information now.
Thorne's expression did not change. Logan was watching. Raymond stood. He had the presentation package on the screen at the front of the room, clean, sequential, each piece of evidence labeled and sourced. And he walked through it with the methodical pace of a man who had prepared to answer every question and deflect every interruption without losing his thread. He started with the component, the photograph, the comparison to the OEM part, the nature of the modification and what it caused. To explain the technical specifics of this component and its effect on the vehicle, Raymond said, "I'm going to turn to Logan Hayes, who discovered the sabotage and whose documentation forms the basis of this evidence package." Logan stood. The room was quieter than a room of 112 people usually was. He walked to the front. He looked at the screen and then he looked at the people, the shareholders, the board members, the press in the back rows. And he thought about what Raymond had said about writing for someone who was thinking about lunch. "I'm a mechanic," he said. "I run a 2-bay garage on Birchfield Avenue. I'm also an automotive systems engineer with about 15 years of experience, which is why I could see something in this car that 6 other experts missed." He pulled up the first photograph. This is the component that was removed from Vivian Sterling's vehicle. This is what the same component should look like. He pulled up the second photograph. The piece on the left is the original. The piece on the right is what replaced the critical internal element. They're the same size, the same general appearance. A standard diagnostic tool treats them as identical, but they're not. He explained what the modified component did. He explained it in the language he had revised until Raymond was satisfied. Clear, sequential, without jargon that required engineering knowledge to unpack. He watched faces as he talked. He could see people following it. He could see the moment on several faces when the understanding arrived. "Someone replaced a small internal component," he said, "with a custom fabricated piece specifically designed to send false catastrophic error signals to the vehicle's computer. The car wasn't broken. It was made to appear broken. To anyone with a standard diagnostic tool, the result looked identical to a genuine catastrophic engine failure." He paused. "It's sophisticated work. Producing that replacement piece required precision fabrication equipment and detailed knowledge of this vehicle's electronic architecture. It wasn't improvised." He nodded to Raymond, who advanced the slide. The Harkin industrial analysis came up. The fabrication source was identified through analysis of the tooling marks and material composition, Logan said. "It's a precision machining facility in Delaware called Harkin Industrial." He felt the room shift slightly. Not dramatically. Just the particular shift of people who were paying close attention and had just received a piece of information they were going to need to remember. "And Harkin Industrial," Raymond continued, smoothly taking the thread, "received payment through a shell company called NX Strategic Group." Raymond advanced the next slide. NX Strategic Group is registered in Delaware, and its registered agent is a law firm with 4 active clients. One of those clients is a private investment vehicle controlled by a current board member of this company. The room was very quiet now. Thorne stood. He stopped. He started again, and Logan could see the very fast recalibration happening, the man running through his options in real time. "This is an extraordinary set of allegations based on what appears to be a chain of circumstantial connections. The financial records are in the package," Raymond said, without heat. Pages 11 through 19. "A shared law firm is not evidence of anything." "Gerald," Vivian's voice cut through the room. Not loud. It didn't need to be. "Sit down." Thorne looked at her. He was a man who had spent 9 years on this board and considerably longer in rooms where power expressed itself through volume and position. He was not accustomed to being told to sit down. He didn't sit. "I would like to know," said a woman's voice from the shareholder section, "what Harkin Industrial's other clients look like." She was a shareholder named Margaret Osei, who Logan had looked up because Raymond had told him she was one of the sharpest people in the room and was likely to ask the best questions. "Is there a pattern to the automotive sector work?" "We've identified 3 other custom jobs in Harkin's records over the past 2 years, Raymond said. 2 of them were for clients traceable to the same investment network. We have that documentation." He looked at Thorne. "We also have the service records from the dealership where the modified component was installed. The technician who performed that service resigned his position 17 days ago, and has not been reachable since. That landed. Logan could feel it, not just the content of it, the timing. The fact that a technician had disappeared in the precise window between Logan fixing the car and the world finding out about the modification. The coincidence was too specific to be coincidental, and the people in this room were not, by and large, people who were unfamiliar with the geometry of corporate misconduct. "I want to ask Mr. Hayes something," said another voice. An older man, shareholder section, second row. Logan didn't know him. "You're a mechanic on Birchfield Avenue. Why did you see this when 5 other experts didn't?" Logan looked at the man. "Because I wasn't looking for what was wrong with the car," he said. "Everyone else was trying to confirm what the diagnostic was telling them. I was trying to figure out why the diagnostic was telling them something that didn't match the physical condition of the engine." He paused. "The engine wasn't damaged. Every other expert started from the assumption that the errors were real. I started from the assumption that they might not be." "Why did you start from that assumption?" "Because the failure pattern was wrong," Logan said. "In a real mechanical failure, there's a sequence. One thing goes, and it creates conditions that cause other things to go. What I was seeing was multiple simultaneous failures across unconnected systems. That doesn't happen. Not naturally." He looked at the man steadily. "It only happens if something is making it happen." The room was quiet. Then Margaret Osei said, "I'd like to move for an independent investigation." She said it the way people said things when they had already decided and were simply performing the procedure correctly. "An external forensic firm not connected to any party in this room to review the complete evidence package and the financial records of any board member with a connection to the identified investment network." Several voices agreed immediately. Thorne said, "This is a coordinated attack on my reputation by a CEO who is trying to deflect attention from her own failures. Gerald." A board member named Susan Park, who had been on the board for 12 years and who Logan had also looked up, spoke from her seat without standing, which somehow made it more devastating. "Stop." The words sat in the room. Thorne stopped. The vote for the independent investigation passed 11-1-1. Logan was in the hallway outside the conference room when it was over, the kind of hallway that corporate buildings built to look important. Marble floors, a view of the city, nothing comfortable to sit on. He was leaning against the wall with his jacket over his arm when Vivian came out. She didn't say anything for a moment. She stood beside him and looked at the view. "The Nakamura rep called while Raymond was presenting," she said. "Takashi Inoue. He'd apparently been watching the financial feed." She paused. "He said the family was reassured by the transparency." "That's good," Logan said. "He said they'd like to move forward with formal ratification at the next opportunity." She paused again. "Which is a significant change from last week." "Yes." "The stock moved 6 points in the last hour of trading." He looked at her. She was looking at the city, her expression controlled in the way it always was in professional spaces, but something in it was looser than he usually saw. Not relief exactly, more like the specific sensation of setting something down that you've been carrying for a long time. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." She turned to look at him. "That was what you did in there, the way you explained it." She seemed, briefly, to be looking for the right word, which was unusual for Vivian, who generally found words without difficulty. "I've sat in a lot of rooms with a lot of experts. Nobody explains things the way you do." "Like I said," he told her, "I wasn't looking for what was wrong. I was asking why." She held his gaze. "That's a different kind of intelligence," she said. "Most people don't make that distinction." He didn't have a response to that didn't feel like too much, so he didn't say anything, and she seemed to understand because she looked back at the view. "What happens to Thorne now?" he asked. "The investigation will find what it finds," she said. "Raymond thinks the financial connections are solid enough that there will be criminal referrals, and regardless of the outcome of that, his position on the board is finished." She said it without satisfaction. "He built 9 years of influence in that company. He had real experience, real knowledge. He just decided at some point that what he'd built legitimately wasn't enough." "It never is," Logan said, "for people like that." She looked at him. "No," she said, "it never is." Below them, the city went on.
Taxis moved, people walked. Somewhere on Birchfield Avenue, the garage was closed for the day, the bay doors down, Nora's drawing still taped to the wall by the coffee machine. "There's something I need to ask you," Vivian said. He waited. "I want to offer you a position," she said, "leading the technology division. Full authority over the engineering agenda, competitive compensation, the resources to actually pursue the kind of work you were doing at Corrigan." She said it directly, which was the only way Vivian said important things. "You have the background. You have the instincts. You spent 5 years underutilized on Birchfield Avenue, and you still saw something 6 credentialed experts missed. I'd like to not waste that." He looked at her. "I know that's a lot to process," she said. "It is," he agreed. "You don't have to answer now." "I know." He looked at the city. He thought about the offer the way he thought about complex problems, methodically, turning it to see each face. The resources, the scope, the challenge of it, the things it would mean, the things it would cost. "Can I tell you something?" "Yes." "The 5 years on Birchfield Avenue," he said. "I know how it looks from the outside. I know it looks like time I lost, or work I wasted, or capability I set aside." He turned the jacket over his arm. "But I got to take Nora to school every morning. I got to be the person she knows is always going to be there. I got to watch her figure out who she is." He paused. "I don't know how to weigh that against a technology division." Vivian was very still. "I'm not saying no," he said. "I'm saying I need to think about what yes actually means before I say it." "That's fair," she said. Raymond appeared at the end of the hallway, phone in hand, with the expression of a man who had 12 urgent things to communicate and was exercising considerable restraint about the order. Vivian glanced at him. 5 minutes, she said, and he nodded and retreated. "Whatever you decide," she said to Logan. "What you did, what you saw, what you built, what you were willing to risk. That mattered. It changed something real." She held his gaze. "I want you to know that I know that." He looked at her. She was standing at the marble hallway with the city behind her and the professional armor slightly down, the way it had been at 2:40 in the morning and the way it had been when she asked if kids liked booths. And he thought about the gap between who a person was and who they let themselves be seen to be, and how occasionally, in the right circumstances, those things got close enough to touch. "I know," he said. Raymond appeared again. Vivian straightened, and the professional composure settled back into place, and she was already thinking about the next thing, which was the correct thing to be thinking about. She moved toward Raymond. Logan pushed off the wall and put his jacket on. He pulled out his phone. He texted Mrs. Beaumont. "Done early. I'll pick up Nora." The thumbs up came back in 6 seconds, then the heart emoji. He took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the afternoon. He picked up Nora from Mrs. Beaumont's at 4 in the afternoon, and she came out of the front door still wearing her backpack, which meant she hadn't fully settled in yet, which meant some part of her had been waiting. She didn't say that. She just came down the porch steps and got in the truck and looked at him with the assessment eyes she'd had since she was about 3 years old. "Well?" she said. "Well, what?" "Dad?" She put her seatbelt on with the energy of someone exercising patience. "You've been doing the thing all week where you make dinner, but you're not really there while you're making it. I figured it was the meeting." He pulled away from the curb. "The meeting went well." "How well?" "Well enough," he said. "The people who needed to be held accountable are going to be held accountable. Vivian's deal is going to go through." Nora considered this. "And the car thing is done?" "The car thing is done." She looked out the window. The afternoon was clear, the kind of mid-season afternoon that couldn't decide whether it was the end of something or the beginning of something else, the light coming in sideways and warm. "Are you going to go back to just being the garage?" He glanced at her. "What do you mean, just being the garage?" "I mean," she made a gesture that was vaguely expansive. "You were doing important stuff, the kind you used to do, before." She said the before in the careful way she sometimes said things that touched the edges of a subject they both navigated carefully. "Is it weird to go back to the garage after all that?" Logan was quiet for a moment, steering through the afternoon traffic. He thought about the offer Vivian had made in the marble hallway. He had been thinking about it, in the background of everything else since she'd said it,
the way you think about something you're not ready to think about directly yet. Do you think the garage isn't important? He asked.
No, Nora said immediately.
That's not what I said.
What did you say?
She picked at a loose thread on her backpack strap. I said, I don't know. I just noticed you were more alive this month, like a different version of you. She paused. A version I haven't seen before. He drove for a block without responding. Then he said, I've been thinking about that. Okay, she said. She didn't push further because Nora had inherited, from one parent or the other, or from some synthesis of both, the ability to know when to wait. They drove home. He made pasta for dinner, and this time he was present while he was making it. She was right. He had been elsewhere all week, and he noticed the difference himself, the way the ordinary texture of an evening could be fully inhabited or only half inhabited, and how much that mattered. They ate. She told him about a book she was reading for school that she actually liked, which she presented as a statistical anomaly, and he asked her about it, and she explained the plot with the particular energy of someone who had been surprised by caring. After she was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a beer he'd been meaning to drink for 2 days, and he thought about what she'd said. A version I haven't seen before. He thought about what it meant that his 8-year-old daughter had noticed something in him this month that she hadn't seen before, and that the thing she'd noticed was something closer to who he used to be. Or maybe not who he used to be exactly. He was not the person he had been at Corrigan, before Anna died, before the world reorganized itself. But some functional version of that person, someone who was using the full reach of what he knew. He sat with that for a while. He finished the beer. He went to bed. The formal investigation into Gerald Thorne and NX Strategic Group was announced publicly 4 days after the shareholders' meeting through a joint statement from Sterling Holdings and the Securities and Exchange Commission that Raymond had helped shape and that Vivian had reviewed 6 times before approving. The statement was careful and factual and did not editorialize, which was, Raymond told Logan, the correct approach, because editorializing gave attorneys room to work, and the last thing anyone needed was more room for attorneys. Thorne's resignation from the board was announced the same day. It was framed, in his own statement, as a decision to step back during a period of personal legal matters, which was the way people in his position framed things when the alternative was being removed publicly. 2 other board members with connections to the Meridian Capital Partners Network also stepped down in the following week, though their connections to the sabotage were never confirmed publicly. Paul Garrett, the service technician who had installed the modified component, was located 11 days after the shareholders' meeting in a rented house in coastal Georgia. He had not, as it turned out, been attempting to disappear permanently. He had been, as Raymond put it to Logan over the phone, a frightened man who panicked rather than a sophisticated co-conspirator, which was a meaningful distinction legally and which ultimately resulted in Garrett cooperating fully with investigators in exchange for considerations that Raymond declined to specify, but that clearly meant a significantly better outcome than he otherwise would have faced. His cooperation produced, among other things, a direct record of the instruction to install the component, which had come through a third party connected to Thorne's network, and which closed the evidentiary gap that Raymond had worried about. It's solid, Raymond told Logan. The criminal referral to the U.S. attorney is going to move forward. Good, Logan said. The coverage is going to be significant, Raymond said. It's already significant. The story of the car, the challenge, you stepping forward, it's going to be everywhere. It was already everywhere. Logan had been aware of this in a peripheral way, the way you're aware of weather coming before you can see it. The shareholders' meeting had been attended by financial press, and the story had moved from financial press to general press to the kind of coverage that wasn't really about the financial specifics anymore, but about the narrative underneath them. The mechanic who saw what the experts missed, the billionaire's car that became evidence, the quiet engineer living in a 2-bay garage who had somehow brought down a board member's 9-year scheme. His phone was doing things it had never done before. He turned off most of the notifications. A reporter called the garage line on a Wednesday morning and asked if Logan would be available for an interview. He referred her to Raymond, which Raymond had told him to do. 2 more called before lunch. He referred them to Raymond. On Thursday, a production company called and asked if he would consider a television feature. He did not refer them to Raymond. He told them no and hung up, which was more abrupt than he usually was on the phone. And then he felt slightly guilty about it for about 45 seconds before reminding himself that he had a car on the lift and a customer waiting. Nora, for her part, found the whole situation considerably more interesting than Logan would have preferred. She came home from school on Thursday with the information that 2 kids in her class had looked him up online, and that there were pictures of the garage on a news website, and that her teacher had said it was a very interesting story. "What did you say?" Logan asked. "I said my dad was a mechanic, and he's really good at it," she said, in the tone of someone who had delivered a prepared statement. "That's exactly right," he said. "There was a photo of you talking to Vivian outside the building, on the news website." She paused. "You looked serious." "It was a serious day." "You always look serious in pictures," she said.
"You should try smiling. I'll put that on the list," he said. She went to do her homework, entirely satisfied with the conversation. Vivian called on Friday evening, just after 7, when Logan was washing the dinner dishes and Nora was theoretically doing homework, and actually, based on the sounds from upstairs, doing something that involved a lot of rearranging of furniture. "How are you holding up?" Vivian asked when he picked up. "I turned off most of my notifications," he said. "That helped?" "That's wise. It's going to peak and then subside. These things always do." A pause. "Raymond says the coverage is running about 70% positive, which for a story involving corporate fraud allegations is actually unusual." "What's the 30%? "People who think you should have taken the $100,000 and are suspicious of someone who didn't," she said, with the faint edge of someone who found this more amusing than irritating. "People are suspicious of not wanting money. People are suspicious of things they don't understand," she said. "You not wanting the money doesn't compute for a lot of people. It makes them think there must be an angle they're missing." He thought about this. "And is there an angle they're missing?" "You bought the car for $500, she said. "You own a fully functional Meridian Spectra that's worth considerably more than that. Some people consider that the angle." "The car runs," Logan said. "I fixed it. I wanted to own a thing I'd fixed." "I know," she said. "I'm saying how it reads to people who don't know you." He dried a plate. "Does it matter how it reads to people who don't know me?" Vivian was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "I suppose it doesn't." The sounds from upstairs had changed character. Furniture rearrangement had apparently concluded, and something involving what might have been a book being dropped had replaced it. "Vivian," he said. "Yes." "The offer you made." He set the plate in the cabinet. "The technology division." "You don't have to give me an answer yet." "I've been thinking about it," he said. "I've been thinking about it since the hallway." She didn't say anything. He'd noticed she was good at that, at not filling silences when the silence was working. "The answer is no," he said. "Not to working with you. The no is specifically to the technology division, to a full executive role, to the structure you described." He leaned against the counter. "But I've been thinking about what yes to something else might look like." "Tell me," she said. "I want to keep the garage," he said. "I want to keep operating it, and I want to be available for Nora in the way I've been available for the past 5 years, which means school mornings and dinner and being the person she calls when something happens." He paused. "But I've also been thinking about the work, about what I could do with actual resources and actual scope. And I think there's a version of that which doesn't require me to become a different person than the person I've become." "A consulting arrangement," Vivian said. It wasn't a question. She'd gotten there before he'd said it, which he'd expected. "Something like that. Project-based. I come in when there's a specific engineering problem that requires my particular—" He searched for the word. "Approach." "The approach that starts from why instead of what," she said. "Yes." He heard her thinking, not the thinking to perform consideration, the actual kind, with its characteristic brief silence and then the sound of someone arriving at a conclusion. "I'd want it formalized," she said. "Not just a handshake arrangement, a real consulting contract with defined scope and compensation that reflects what you actually bring." "Raymond can write it," Logan said. Something that was not quite a laugh came through the phone. "Raymond is going to love that," she said. He enjoys having things to write, Logan said. This time it was more clearly almost a laugh. He does, she said. He genuinely does. They were quiet for a moment, and it was the kind of quiet that had developed its own texture over the weeks. No longer the quiet of two people who didn't know each other, but the quieter kind, the kind that didn't need to prove it was comfortable because it simply was. The Nakamura ratification is next week, she said. It's going to be straightforward. Both parties want it done. But there's a dinner afterward, with the Nakamura family and their representatives. A pause. I'd like you to come. He turned this over. Why? Because they know the story, she said. Because the deal surviving is directly connected to what you found and what we did with it, and because I'd like you there. She said this last part without elaboration, in the direct way she said things that mattered to her, and he understood that the directness was itself the signal. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. Do I need to wear a specific kind of suit? Do you own more than one kind? I own one kind, he said. That's fine, she said. And then, bring Nora. There will be other people there. It won't be only business. He looked up at the ceiling, from which he could hear Nora, apparently engaged in some negotiation with the cat from next door, that had recently taken to appearing at her window, despite the fact that they did not have a window that opened in a way that should have made this possible. She'll want to wear the soccer jersey, he said. Tell her to wear the nice one, Vivian said. The one without the grass stain. He paused. How do you know about the grass stain? She was wearing it when I met her, Vivian said. I have a good memory. He stood in the kitchen with the phone against his ear and the dish towel over his shoulder and the sounds of his daughter above him, and he thought about the fact that Vivian Sterling, who had been a profile and a headline and a challenge announcement before she was a person to him, had noticed which jersey Nora was wearing the night they met and remembered it 3 weeks later. I'll tell her, he said. The Nakamura dinner was held at a restaurant that was the kind of place Logan had eaten in approximately twice in his life, and both times had been for professional occasions that required someone else's expense account. It was not ostentatious, but the Nakamura family, he quickly understood, did not do ostentatious, which was itself a form of wealth so settled it had nothing to prove. But it was serious in the way that places serious about food were serious, with a quiet that was the product of good insulation and staff who moved as though noise was a resource to be conserved. Nora wore the jersey without the grass stain. She also wore, under protest, the cardigan that Logan had suggested and then had to negotiate for, and she had put her hair up herself, which produced a result that was genuinely trying and only slightly chaotic, and Logan had not said anything about the chaos because trying was the thing that mattered. Takashi Inoue was 61 years old and had the manner of someone who had spent 4 decades conducting business across cultural contexts and had absorbed from all of them a quality of careful attention that made you feel, when he spoke to you, that he was actually listening. He shook Logan's hand at the beginning of the evening and said, I've read about what you found, and the way he said it was not the way most people said it, with the celebrity of the moment energy that Logan had been navigating for 2 weeks. It was the way an engineer might say it, with genuine professional respect. You had background in this kind of system, Takashi said, at Corrigan. Yes, Logan said. Corrigan had a very good engineering culture, Takashi said. We looked at a partnership with them years ago, before the financial difficulties. He paused. It's a shame what happened to them. Yes, Logan said. It was. Vivian was across the table, managing the dinner's multiple conversations with the simultaneous processing ability Logan had noticed she had in professional settings, present to each exchange while keeping the full picture in frame. She caught his eye briefly, across the table, in the moment when Takashi was turning to speak to someone on his right, and something passed between them that didn't have a specific name, but that Logan recognized as the language of 2 people who had been through something together that they didn't have to explain to each other. Nora, seated beside Logan, was engaged in a focused conversation with a woman named Keiko, who was Takashi's daughter and who handled the family's international communications, and who had, within about 8 minutes of sitting down, identified that Nora was someone worth talking to and directed her full attention accordingly. They were discussing, from what Logan could hear,
something to do with the specific mechanics of bicycle gears, which Keiko apparently knew about from a cycling period in her 20s, and which Nora apparently found relevant to a problem she'd been having with her bike for 3 weeks. He watched his daughter talk to this woman across the dinner table, leaning forward slightly with the intensity she brought to things that genuinely interested her, hands moving to illustrate gear ratios in the air, entirely unintimidated by the room or the occasion or the fact that the people in it controlled significant portions of 2 countries' economic activity. She was just Nora, talking about gears with someone who knew about gears. He thought, Anna would have loved this, not the room. Anna had never particularly wanted the room, but this version of their daughter, unafraid and curious and entirely herself. She would have loved this so much. He picked up his water glass. He let the moment complete itself. 2 months after the shareholders' meeting, on a Tuesday that was ordinary in every way, except that it was the first Tuesday in a while with nothing urgent attached to it, Logan took the afternoon off from the garage and took Nora to the park. She had been asking about the park with increasing specificity for 3 weeks. Not any park, the one on Meridian Avenue with the newer equipment and the good open area for the soccer ball she now carried everywhere as a matter of personal policy. He had been meaning to do it, and something had always intervened, and then the morning of this particular Tuesday, he had looked at the appointment book, found 2 cancellations that had opened the afternoon, and called Mrs. Beaumont to say he'd be picking Nora up from school himself. She had come out of the school's front door at 3:15 and found him leaning against the truck, and her face had done what it did, and she had said, "We're going to the park," with the certainty of someone who had decided this was happening sometime around second period. "We're going to the park," he confirmed. It was a good afternoon for it. The light was the long kind, past the height of summer but still generous, and the park had the specific energy of a weekday afternoon, a different kind of crowd than weekends, more unhurried, more people simply being outside rather than performing outdoor activity. They found an open patch of grass, and Nora immediately established herself with the soccer ball, and Logan sat on the bench at the edge of the grass and watched her. He had been thinking, for the past 2 months, about something Walt Svoboda had said to him early in all of this, before the shareholders' meeting, before the evidence package, back when it was still just a sealed component in a New Jersey storage unit, and a theory that had to be proven. Walt had said, "Be careful." And then later, on the video call, he had said that people who build something that sophisticated don't scare easy. Walt had been right on both counts. What Logan thought about now was the third thing, the thing Walt hadn't said but that Logan had found anyway, on the other side of all of it, that the people who build those things, who engineer their schemes with that kind of precision and patience, are ultimately building on sand. Because their whole architecture depends on no one looking at the right thing in the right way. One person who asks why instead of what, who trusts the physical evidence over the diagnostic report, and the whole construction collapses. He thought about what that meant, in the broader sense. Not about Thorne specifically, but about the general principle. About the way the world consistently underestimated the person who was simply paying close attention to the right things. He had been underestimated his entire adult life, in one way or another. At Corrigan, he'd been the engineer who took the long view when speed was valued more, who wanted to understand the foundational problem when the client wanted the surface solution. After Anna died and he moved to Birchfield Avenue, the underestimation had been of the more ordinary kind, people driving past his garage without registering it, the quiet invisibility of a small operation in a neighborhood that bigger operations had abandoned. The reporters who had called after the shareholders' meeting had all, in one way or another, framed the story as a surprise. The mechanic who turned out to be more than a mechanic. The unlikely hero. He had thought about that framing more than he expected to. What it revealed was not about him, specifically, but about what people expected from the packaging. A 2-bay garage on Birchfield Avenue, a guy in a worn jacket with grease under his fingernails. The packaging suggested certain things, and most people took the packaging at face value because it was easier and faster than looking underneath. The mistake Thorne and his network had made was the same one everyone makes when they rely on that assumption. They forgot that packaging is not content. The modified component worked because it looked identical to the original. The sabotage worked because everyone trusted what it looked like and stopped there. And Logan had seen through it for the same reason that he'd always seen through that kind of surface reading. Because Anna had told him early in their relationship that he looked at things the way very few people bothered to, and that it was the most and least practical quality she had ever encountered in another person. And she had meant it as the specific kind of compliment that is also, slightly, a complaint, and he had understood her exactly. He had thought about her a lot these past 2 months. Not more than before, not the raw grief kind of thinking that had characterized the first years. More like consulting her almost. Running things by her memory, the way you'd call someone you trusted when you needed to check your own reasoning. She would have had strong opinions about Vivian, nuanced ones, which Anna always had. She didn't do simple takes on complex people. She would have said something accurate and slightly uncomfortable that Logan would have needed a few days to fully process. She would have been right. He watched Nora juggle the soccer ball, 3 touches, 4, then lose it, chase it down, set up again with the focused patience she'd been developing for a year. She fell down at one point on a small divot in the grass and got up without ceremony and went back to it. He noticed this and thought it was probably the best thing about her. That particular quality of getting up without making it a thing, not performing resilience, just resuming because there was more to do. He hoped she kept it. He hoped the world didn't teach her to perform it instead of simply have it. The afternoon light shifted. Across the park, a small group of kids had started a loose game of something that involved running and not much other structure. Nora looked at it, looked back at her ball, and then, with the decisiveness she'd inherited from somewhere in the joint genetic project of her parents, picked up the ball and walked over to see if they needed another player. Logan watched her go. He heard the car before he saw it. Not because he was listening for it, but because the engine had a particular sound that he had made himself responsible for. And you remember the sounds of things you've worked on. The Spectra pulled into the small lot adjacent to the park, and Vivian got out. And she was not in the corporate presentation version. No heels, no structured jacket, jeans, a light jacket, hair not precisely arranged. She walked toward him with the slightly uncertain quality he had come to recognize as what Vivian looked like in situations that hadn't been planned, and she stopped at the bench and looked at him. "Clara said you took the afternoon off," she said. "I did," he said. "I was in the area." She paused. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "Sit down," he said. She sat. Not the way she sat in conference rooms with the alert posture of professional readiness. She sat the way people sat on park benches, slightly settled, shoulders down. Across the park, Nora had been incorporated into the loose game and was apparently running, from what Logan could see, with characteristic purpose. "The Nakamura deal closed this morning," Vivian said. "I know. Raymond texted me. The stock is at 121. She was quiet for a moment. "The highest it's been in 2 years. "That's good," he said. "Yes." She looked at the park. "Raymond finalized your consulting contract. It's ready to sign whenever you're ready." "I'll sign it this week." She nodded. Then she was quiet in a way that suggested the Nakamura deal and the contract weren't the things she'd come to talk about. He waited. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "And I wasn't sure how to say it in a professional context, which is the only context I'm reliably good at." She looked at her hands, which were in her lap. "So I thought I'd say it here." "Okay," he said. "Before all of this," she said, "I was managing a company well, and I was making money, and I was winning by every measurable standard I'd built my life around." She paused. "And I was also doing something I hadn't fully admitted to myself, which was conducting every human relationship in my life at the same distance I maintain in a contract negotiation. Because the distance was safe. Because nothing could destabilize me if nothing was close enough to matter." He looked at her. "What you found in that car," she said, "wasn't just evidence of a crime. It changed the terms of something for me. Because you were paying attention, not for a reward, not for the credit, not for any angle that I could identify. And I'm very good at finding the angle." She turned to look at him. "I couldn't find yours because it wasn't there." "I was paying attention because the thing was wrong," he said. "Because something that should have made sense didn't make sense." "I know," she said. "That's what I mean." She looked away again toward the park, where Nora was now apparently in possession of someone else's ball and running with it. "Most people don't operate like that. Most people in my world operate from transaction, even the ones who think they don't. She paused. You don't. And it made me realize that I'd been operating from transaction for so long that I'd almost forgotten there was another way. Logan was quiet. He was thinking about what it cost her to say this, given everything she'd told him about herself, the way she'd built her life to be unassailable, the father who could charm a room into believing anything, the early failure, the company rebuilt from almost nothing. He was thinking about the 2:40 phone call and the park bench and the space between who someone was and who they let themselves be seen to be, and how occasionally those things got close enough to touch. You came a long way from Route 9, he said. Something moved across her face. It was a long night on Route 9, she said. It was, he agreed. But it got you here. She looked at him. The afternoon light was doing the long sideways thing it did at this hour, and across the park his daughter was running, and the city was going about its business all around them, indifferent and ongoing, and Vivian Sterling was sitting on a park bench in jeans with her hair not perfectly arranged, saying things she hadn't fully said before. I'd like to have lunch, she said. Not a business lunch. Not a lunch where Raymond is copied on the follow-up. Just lunch. He looked at her for a moment. He thought about Anna and about the particular way she had called him impractical as a compliment that was also slightly a complaint, and about the version of himself his daughter had identified this month that she hadn't seen before. He thought about the 2-bay garage and the drawing on the wall and $500 for a car that everyone agreed was worthless. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. She nodded once. She looked back out at the park. Across the grass, Nora had stopped running and was looking at them, assessing in the way she assessed things. Then she raised one hand in a wave, not a hello wave, more of an acknowledgement, the gesture of someone who had registered a situation and filed it appropriately, and turned back to the game. Logan watched his daughter turn back to the game. He thought about what she'd said in the truck 2 months ago, a version I haven't seen before. He thought she was right, and he thought the version she was seeing wasn't the Corrigan version, the engineer before everything version. It was something newer, something that had been made out of the garage and the years with her and the Tuesday afternoons at the park and the one strange month that had started on Route 9 in the rain. He thought you could spend a lot of time trying to figure out which version of yourself was the real one and miss the fact that you were building it the whole time, that the real one was always the current one, made from the sum of what you'd done and who you'd let in and what you'd paid attention to. He had paid attention to the right thing at the right moment because that was how he was made. And it had led here to a shareholders meeting and a consulting contract and a closed deal and a Tuesday afternoon in the park. Small things and large things, tangled together the way life tangled them, without regard for which category they were supposed to belong to. He thought there was something worth saying in that. Not a lesson, exactly. He was suspicious of the clean lesson, the tidy conclusion, the story that knew too precisely what it meant, but something closer to an observation about the way significance traveled. It didn't announce itself. It arrived in the packaging of the ordinary, a car on the side of a highway, a sealed component in a plastic bag, a drawing taped to a wall, a woman on a park bench saying things she hadn't found a professional context for. You had to be paying attention, was the thing. You had to be the kind of person who looked underneath the surface reading who asked why when everyone else stopped at what. Not because it made you exceptional. Logan had spent enough time now not feeling exceptional to know that the word fit badly, but because the world constantly and quietly rewarded the person who bothered to look. He had looked. The rest had followed from that. On the bench beside him, Vivian was quiet, watching the park, and the quiet was the comfortable kind. Across the grass, Nora scored something. He could tell from the way she raised both arms, the same gesture as the photograph on the About page of the garage website, both fists in the air like she had won something. Maybe she had. She usually thought so. He smiled. He didn't try to stop it. The afternoon ran out slowly, the way good afternoons did, without hurry. The light went from sideways to low. The other kids in the park drifted away by ones and twos, called home, and Nora came walking back across the grass with her soccer ball and her untucked jersey, and her hair falling back out of the attempt, cheeks red from running, with the expression of a person who had used the afternoon correctly.
She looked at the two of them on the bench. She looked at Logan. She looked at Vivian. "Are we getting dinner?" she said. Vivian looked at Logan. Logan looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said. "We're getting dinner." Nora considered the available options with the seriousness this deserved. "Callahan's?" she said. "Callahan's," Vivian said, before Logan could answer.
And then to Nora, with something in her voice that was close to but not quite the same as her professional register. Something warmer, less certain, more actual. "They have a milkshake menu." "A whole separate one," Nora said with great satisfaction. "Just for milkshakes." She walked ahead of them toward the parking lot, ball under her arm, and Logan and Vivian stood up from the bench, and they walked after her into the low, late light of the ordinary afternoon. And the city held them all the way. It held everything. Without ceremony, without judgment, just the ongoing fact of the world continuing, which was, when you paid close attention to it, enough.